Chapter 3179. When I was young, I would often climb trees on all fours and pick wild fruits to eat. After watching so many Wuxia dramas, I felt that these wild fruits might be mysterious elixirs. Eating them would give me a certain chance of immortality. When I picked the unripe green fruit and tasted it in my mouth, it tasted sour and bitter without any sweetness. But this was my youth. Some dreams are destined to remain dreams. Some love is destined to be unattainable. Some promises are like bubbles that burst at a touch. Some lies are so realistic that they can deceive myself. But Dongyu, the worst lie in my life was to lie to myself and say that I don't like you anymore. I closed my eyes and thought that I could forget you, but the tears that flowed didn't lie to me. At the wedding, the church was decorated with fresh flowers and a white veil. It was holy and beautiful. I tidied up the flowers on the arch and turned around to see the bride rushing to the venue with the help of the flower girl. Dongyu was in charge of receiving the guests in the living room, while the bride went to the dressing room to touch up her makeup. I walked to the makeup artist with the flowers in my hands and placed a bouquet of roses in a vase. When the bride saw me, she smiled in a friendly manner and pointed at me. "You're Yin Xiachuan, aren't you?" I turned around and nodded silently. "Dongyu often mentions you." The bride tilted her head and said, "Sometimes, even in his dreams, he often calls your name." My back stiffened, but I pretended to be nonchalant and went about my business. "My name is Ning." I know your name. But you have to call me sister-in-law in the future." I turned around and asked with a smile, "Sister-in-law, how did you and Dongyu meet?" She was surprised for a moment that I had obediently addressed her as sister-in-law. When she realized my question, she immediately replied, "University classmate." Indeed. I guessed that with Dongyu's cold personality, his social circle would only be limited to his classmates and colleagues. I tidied up the bouquet seriously and asked tentatively, "You must love my brother very much, right? Otherwise, it would be difficult to tolerate his taciturn personality." "Is that how you describe your brother?" Ning silently observed my actions and suddenly chuckled. "Haha, marrying him was like a dream. It felt unreal. I love him very much. As much as he loves you." My hand froze as I stared at her in disbelief. "Are you surprised? Why would I know about this?" Ning stood up and walked to me. There were only the two of us in the dressing room. She walked to my side and suddenly bumped my shoulder gently. "You know what? He has never forgotten you. I know that your position in his heart is extraordinary and irreplaceable. You?" I couldn't help but feel puzzled. "If you knew, why did you marry him?" "Because I love him as much as you do. I have no regrets." Ning smiled, but the smile in her eyes was extremely pure. "If you love someone, you will be so humble that you fall into the dust. Even if his heart belongs to someone else, as long as you can protect him, you will naturally accept it. Don't you think it's unfair?" I smirked. "If the man you love doesn't love you back, then this marriage must be very disloyal." "I don't think so." Ning continued. "Feelings can be nurtured. However, I know that the only woman he loves deeply will never be with him. To me, isn't that the greatest loyalty?" The stunned look on my face became even more obvious. Ning enunciated each word clearly. "I will work hard to make him fall in love with me. At the same time, I will be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, a good sister-in-law." I smiled calmly, but there was no emotion in my eyes. "I wish you all the best." I tidied up the bouquet and put it aside before walking out of the door. Behind me, she suddenly said, "I think I'm very lucky. At least I can marry the man I love." However, I didn't stop for even half a step and just left. I knew that she didn't mean any harm by saying that. She was just trying to prove her love and loyalty to Dongyu. But compared to these words, I had experienced 100 times crueler torture. Outside the church, I stood at the door and raised my head to look at the blue sky. White clouds floated gently. I pinched a rose and played with it with my fingertips. Bit by bit, I plucked off the petals and let them fall to the ground, eventually crumbling into mud. In the end, I still didn't have the courage to witness that scene with my own eyes. I ran out of the door like a deserter, but the vows had officially begun. In the church, the priest's serious voice rang out. "Ning, are you willing to take this man as your husband and enter into a marriage contract with him?" In sickness and in health, in poverty and in wealth, will you love him, take care of him, respect him, accept him, and be loyal to him until the end of your life? I lowered my head and took out the ring box from my pocket. I opened it gently. A 1-carat ring lay quietly inside. Brother, when we grow up, will you buy me a ring with a huge diamond inlaid on it like the male leads on TV and put it on my finger personally? When I was young, I made an innocent wish. Every girl must have a dream about being a bride. I dreamed that one day, I would be able to stand in a holy church and watch him put on my finger with a huge diamond inlaid on it. Then, he would elegantly put it on my ring finger and make a promise to me. However, the ring didn't have to be a 1-carat, and the wedding didn't have to be held in a church. But the man standing opposite me holding my hand had to be that person. On the night before our wedding, he took out this exquisite gift box from his pocket and opened it. Under the moonlight, the 1-carat diamond shone charmingly. It was such an unintentional sentence from his childhood, but he remembered it seriously in his heart. With my back against him, I held this small but exquisite box as if it was a treasure. With tears in my eyes, I smiled contentedly. There were so many illusory dreams in life, and one of them had actually come true. I gently took out the ring and carefully put it on my ring finger. My fingers were pressed together as I looked at the diamond ring. I couldn't help but smile and plant a gentle kiss on the diamond. My lips parted slightly, almost in sync with the voice in the church. I do. Don't use voice still echoed in my ears. Chapter 3180. Lu Jinyu hurriedly handed the cuddly little ball over to Yun Shirshir. When she was in Yun Shirshir's arms, the little girl was still crying badly. However, compared to when she was in Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu's arms, she was a little more restrained. Yun Shirshir coaxed her a little, and the rain immediately cleared up. She broke into a smile. When she smiled, her eyes were still filled with tears. Those tears that were like fragments of starlight were contained in her red eye sockets. Her jet-black eyes were like shiny black jade agates. Looking at them, one's heart would soften to the extreme. Her eyes, which had just cried, seemed to be covered by a layer of fog. The corners of her eyes were slightly raised, outlining the beautiful corners of her eyes. She was like an otherworldly little angel. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were about to drool. They were considered to be well-informed and had seen countless people. Many of their friends and relatives had their own fruits of love when they reached the age. However, little Yueyao was definitely the most adorable one they had ever seen. Actually, when the news of Yun Shirshir's pregnancy first spread, they had guessed that with Mu Yaja and Yun Shirshir's good genes, the daughter would definitely be juicy and beautiful. However, when they saw little Yueyao in full bloom, it was still far beyond their expectations. Jiang Shun was mesmerized by the sight. He was a little regretful. He was young and playful and wasn't in a hurry to find a partner. If he had a wife and a son at this time, he would definitely think of ways to become in-laws with his boss. Such an adorable little princess, who was only a few months old, could already imagine how alluring she would be when she grew up, especially when she cried and smiled with narrowed eyes. That pair of lively eyes could melt one's heart into a puddle of water. However, Lu Jinyu was much more clear-headed than him. He knew that it wasn't easy to become in-laws with his boss. It was obvious to all that old madam loved her daughter dearly. How could she be so easily married to someone else's family and be coveted? She's so young, but she can already recognize people? Jiang Shun found it very interesting. My sister's son only knows how to cry when a stranger hugs him when he's 1 year old. Yu said from the side. Little sis is very sensitive. She won't let anyone hug her. Even if it was us hugging, little sister seemed to have calculated the time. If you hug her for too long, she won't be happy either. Xiaoichen added. Little sister likes me a little more. Every time I hug her, she'll let me hug her a little longer. This means that she prefers me as her brother. When Yu heard this, she was a little unhappy. What nonsense are you talking about? What a self-righteous fellow. My younger sister clearly likes me more. When I was hugging her, she squinted her eyes and smiled. She was so happy. After coaxing her, Yun Shirshir placed her back in the crib. Little did she know that little Yueyao, who was lying in the crib, was probably a little excited when she saw that there were more people around. She waved her little hands and giggled happily. Jiang Shun was curious and quickly took out his phone to take a picture of this loving scene. She looks so good when she smiles. This little girl is so charming. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw her blushing face, as if she was about to do something earth-shattering. He saw her feet in the air and she made a fuss. Then she flipped to the side. Her little feet kicked up, and her whole body flipped over in an instant. Wow! Chapter 3181. Xiaoqian was surprised as well. Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu were stunned as well. They had no idea when the little girl had become so capable. She even knew how to turn things around. They saw the little Yueyao flapping her tiny body and sticking her butt out as she lay on the crib with her back facing the sky. Her tiny hands were clenched into fists as she casually grabbed the doll that was placed at the side. She flapped a few more times before she flipped over and lay on the bed. She held the doll with her two tiny hands and started waving it around. She babbled and her saliva stained the soft towel. Jiang Shun suddenly asked curiously, "Who's changing this little girl's diaper at home now?" Yun Shishir suddenly thought of something and actually burst out laughing. Jiang Shun quickly asked what was going on and why she was laughing for no reason. She then said, "I thought of someone who changed Yuyao's diaper for the first time." He didn't need to guess to know that she was referring to the eldest son. Jiang Shun widened his eyes in surprise. The eldest son knows how to change diapers. Yes. It's not like you don't know that he's been longing for a daughter. Look, now that she's born, he's doting on her like a treasure. It's as if he can't wait to do everything himself. When I told him to change the diaper, he wouldn't be able to take it. When I asked him to do it, he was full of confidence and thought nothing of it. He said that changing a diaper was no big deal. In the end, when I undid the diaper, his face was all scrunched up. It smelled so bad. After all, the child was still young. She couldn't control her urine and feces. This diaper couldn't be wrapped all the time. If it got dirty, someone had to change it. In the end, Muyaja didn't think it was a big deal. However, when he undid the diaper and smelled it, the smell was unforgettable. According to Muyaja's own description at that moment, the smell was so bad that he wanted to go to the heavens. Although the smell was a little unpleasant, it didn't stop Muyaja from loving the little princess. After smelling it a lot, he got used to it. In the beginning, when they were still in the hospital, most of the time it was the confinement nanny who took care of them. When they returned home, he did it himself. He said that his daughter's butt smelled good. Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, even she felt a little jealous. She watched as Muyaja took good care of the little princess, regardless of whether it was feeding her milk, comforting her, or changing her diapers. She gradually got used to it and was no longer so clumsy. Things started to go smoothly. Sometimes, when the two of them finally had some time together, she would hug him and joke that she had been born in the wrong body. When Muyaja asked her why, she said half seriously, "Why do I want to be your daughter more than your wife, Papa Yaja?" As soon as she said this, Muyaja pressed her down and pecked the corner of her lips lightly. He said playfully, "It seems that I have indeed neglected someone these few days." He served his daughter well, but neglected his wife. "Madam, how do you want me to make up for it?" Yun Shishir punched his chest. "You have to go to work and wake up at night to take care of the little one. How can you still be so energetic?" "The moment I see you, I'm full of energy." Chapter 3182. After giving birth to her daughter, she had completely become a little worm who only cared about eating, drinking, and sleeping well. This man had taken care of all the chores, so she felt that there was nothing else to do. Yu said, "Mommy, you can be like other rich ladies and go shopping at the mall when you have nothing to do. You stay at home all day. No wonder you have so much free time." "I don't like to play with those rich ladies who are too effeminate," Yun Shishir said and continued, "I'm happier and more free at home." Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun did not dare to stay for too long. They had come out this time without telling a certain man. If Muyaja found out that they had traveled thousands of miles during their lunch break to secretly touch his daughter, he would definitely be furious. Seeing that it was almost time to go to work, they hurriedly said goodbye and hurriedly returned to the office dejectedly. In the evening, Muyaja returned home after work. Yun Shishir went to the entrance to welcome him. He hurriedly kissed her cheek and eagerly walked to the crib. Yun Shishir stayed where she was, feeling flustered. She turned around and saw a certain man happily walking to the crib. He bent down and hurriedly carried the little princess in his arms. He did not even look at the little girl who was sleeping soundly at the moment. He did not care. He had not seen his daughter for a day and missed her dearly. He did not know why, but after an entire day of work, whenever he thought of his daughter's pink and tender face, his heart seemed to be filled with something. This was probably the feeling of happiness. Once there was weight in his heart in someone he cared about, his heart would have long drifted back home while he was in the office. This did not mean that he was biased and neglected the mother and children because of the little princess. It was just that Yu was a little tsundere and did not rely on him that much. She was a mischievous child. As for Xiaoyichen, perhaps because he had been too strict with his son since he was young, Xiaoyichen had always respected his father. As for his little Yue Yao, every time she saw him, she would reveal an extremely dependent expression. When he hugged her, she would also look at him with her bright eyes. Her two small hands would occasionally pat his cheeks, and at other times she would tug at his tie. It always gave him a feeling of being deeply relied on. Men like to be relied on. Muyaja hugged Yue Yao lovingly. He looked up and asked, "Have you changed Yue Yao's diapers?" "I've already changed it for her." Yun Shirshir walked to his side and sat down. She rested her chin on his shoulder and looked at him. Little Yue Yao was still asleep. When he carried her, his movements were very careful, afraid that he would wake her up. Now she was like an obedient kitten snuggling in his arms. Her mouth was moving, and she was even bubbling. Yun Shirshir reached out with her finger, popped the bubble and laughed. "She's sleeping soundly." Muyaja gently patted her back. He looked up and met her eyes, and the corners of his lips curled up. He suddenly said, "For the past few days I've been discussing the details of the wedding with the wedding planner. However, the theme of the wedding hasn't been decided yet. When they came back, they wanted me to ask you what theme and style you would like for the wedding." "Style?" "The decorations of the venue," Yun Shirshir said. "How would I know about these things?" "You can decide." Chapter 3183. I don't really understand. I don't know what the theme and style are. Muyaja changed the topic and asked her, "Do you like Chinese weddings or Western weddings?" This question stumped her. Chinese weddings were red and gold or red and black. It was steady and passionate, traditional yet novel and extremely solemn. Most importantly, Chinese weddings had phoenix coronets and red robes. The classical charm was hard for many women to resist. Speaking of China's traditional culture, there was still a lot of charm to it. Imagine wearing a gorgeous Han costume, phoenix coronets, and red robes. It must be a unique and beautiful scene. However, most weddings nowadays were Western weddings. The most eye-catching feature of Western weddings was the holy and beautiful wedding dress. Holy and snow white. Whether it was the style of a fishtail or the style of a princess's tutu, every wedding dress had its own characteristics. Flowers, an arch, a sacred and solemn vow. A custom-made wedding cake and a champagne tower were also not bad. Yun Shirshir was a little conflicted because whether it was a Chinese wedding or a Western wedding, she liked them both. Yun Shirshir frowned and was a little hesitant. "I like the solemnity of Chinese weddings, and the elegance of Western weddings. I like phoenix coronets and red robes, and I also like holy and pure wedding dresses. So, if you ask me whether a Western wedding or a Chinese wedding, I like both. It's really hard to choose. Since it's hard to choose, then let's do both styles together." Huh? Yun Shirshir was a little stunned. Oh my god, these two styles don't fit together. How can they be done together? An outdoor lawn wedding and an indoor Chinese wedding. Since you like both, it's not like you don't have the qualifications. Yun Shirshir asked again. "What about you?" Which kind of wedding do you prefer?" Muyaja smiled. His gaze fell on the sleeping face of the little one in his arms. He said gently, "As long as the person standing in front of me and swearing to me is you, any style is fine." He really didn't care about the style. He liked the person who walked into the wedding hall with him. When the day came, he was afraid that when she walked in front of him, the whole world would be overshadowed in that instant. Whether it was the Chinese style or the Western style, he probably didn't have time to care about it. In his eyes there was only her. He couldn't see anything clearly. He couldn't see anything. On that day, at that moment, What could be more beautiful and eye-catching than her standing in front of him? How could Yun Shirshir know what he was thinking? Seeing that he threw the question back at her, she started to feel conflicted again. Hubby, am I being too greedy? You like the Western style but you also want the Chinese style? Before she finished speaking, the little guy in her bosom suddenly kicked his legs. She didn't know if this was a dream, or if he was dreaming about something, but after kicking twice in a row, it actually woke her up. Before she even opened her eyes, her tears had already fallen. It was probably because he had been sleeping well and was woken up by her. The little guy was also a little angry when he woke up. He couldn't wake up and was in a terrible mood. He groaned a few times and actually cried out in grievance. Muyaja hurriedly coaxed her. He kissed her forehead, patted her back and said in a low voice, "Wow, don't cry. Wow, don't cry." Chapter 3184. It's all your fault. Yun Shirshir blamed him. You wanted to hug her the moment you came back. She's still sleeping. It's not like you don't know that the little one cries when she's not awake. Muyaja didn't think much of it. It's been a hard day. Isn't it only right to come back and hug my little princess? As he spoke, he gently kissed little Yuyao's forehead as a form of consolation. Seeing that she was crying, he coaxed her patiently without the slightest bit of impatience or helplessness like a newbie stay-at-home dad. He was already able to handle little Yuyao's cries with ease. He suddenly took out a small red brocade box from his pocket. It looked very exquisite. He handed the box to her and gestured, "Open it and take a look." Yun Shirshir took it curiously and looked at him. Puzzled, she asked, "What's this?" "Open it and you'll know." Yun Shirshir raised her eyebrows and opened the box. Inside the box lay a small but exceptionally exquisite longevity lock, made of pure silver. Longevity locks, also known as longevity strands, were usually worn during a 100-day banquet, or when a child was 1 year old. The longevity lock was worn to prevent diseases and spirits from invading and harming the child. In ancient times, people believed that once a child wore a lock, he or she would be able to grow up safe and sound. Longevity locks were mostly made of pure silver, and were engraved with the words, "Long life and riches." People believed that locks were sealing devices. Once a door or box was locked, it could only be opened with a key. Therefore, it was believed that longevity locks could lock up health and life. This was a rather superstitious way of saying it. At first, Muyaja didn't pay much attention to this. After all, he didn't have much experience and didn't understand many of the more traditional rules and sayings. However, on the 100-day banquet, a female guest suddenly asked, "Why didn't you give the child a longevity lock?" When Muyaja heard this, he was a little puzzled. What was a longevity lock? Thus, the upper-class lady explained it to him. Muyaja didn't think much of it. However, when he returned home from work today, he didn't know why. But he went to the jewelry store and chose a nice design. He bought a longevity lock for his little Yueyao. Longevity lock? Yun Shirshir was surprised and said coquettishly, "Didn't you say that these are all superstitions and not to be believed?" Muyaja's face turned red with embarrassment. Then he explained seriously, "Although it's a superstition, it's reasonable that it exists. I'd rather believe it." "Oh." Yun Shirshir took the longevity lock in her hand and rubbed it with her fingers. She said, "You can't just buy a longevity lock just because you want to." When Yueyao was 12 years old, he still had to remember to ask for a golden key to restore it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be effective and sincere enough. Actually, I think that there are some traditions that you either don't believe in. If you believe in them, you have to believe in them sincerely and revere them. As she said this, she put the longevity lock around little Yuyao's neck. As she put it on for her, she made a sincere wish in her heart. "I hope that Yueyao will be safe and sound in this life, and live a long life of wealth and prosperity." She didn't know why, but when she fastened the longevity lock, little Yueyao blinked and stopped crying. How strange. Chapter 3185. She sucked on her finger, looked at Yun Shirshir and then looked at Muyaja. Suddenly, she was so excited that she danced. "Yaya!" She reached out with her saliva and slapped Muyaja's face. Her saliva got all over his face. Yun Shirshir was amused. Muyaja also laughed. He looked at Yueyao and then at her. She won't cry when she's locked. Sometimes some things are really hard to explain. I always feel like there's a deep mystery behind it. She's just like that. She cries one moment and is happy the next. She loves it when you and little Jia hug her the most. Especially you. No matter how aggrieved she cries, she'll stop crying when she's in your arms. As Yun Shirshir spoke, she harumphed indignantly. They say that daughters are close to their fathers. I think this is true. It's not a lie at all. Aren't you close to her? Yun Shirshir tilted her head and said, It's not that we aren't close. It's just that when she cries, I'll coax her for a long time but she won't smile. Do you know? Sometimes she's very adorable. When she's lying in the crib alone and Yu suddenly sticks her head in, she'll get a fright and start crying. Sometimes she's very smart. She knows that when she cries, many people will fight to hug her. But when it comes to hugging her, she recognizes people very well. If the person hugging her isn't the person she wants, she'll continue crying. For example, Hua Jin. Sometimes when Hua Jin hugs her, she'll still cry. It's only when little Jia hugs her that she slowly stops crying. Isn't it a good thing that the child is smart? If she's as dumb as Xiaoyichen, then she'll be done for. Mu Yaja felt that it was only right. Xiaoyichen was passing by the living room when he suddenly heard these words. It was as if a huge black pot had been smashed on the back of his head. He felt as if he had been shot even though he was lying down. He covered his chest and complained unhappily, Daddy, you're talking bad about me behind my back again. Yu walked past Xiaoyichen and saw that Mu Yaja was carrying little Yueyao like a slave to his daughter. She suddenly fanned the flames and said, Xiaoyichen, look, ever since your little sister was born, your position in Daddy's heart has been getting lower and lower. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyichen felt even more aggrieved. Unable to contain his anger, he threatened, Daddy, don't forget that you have to work during the day. When I was at home, I talked bad about you in my sister's ears every day. How dare you? Mu Yaja took his words seriously and glared at him. You're not allowed to speak ill of Daddy in front of Yueyao. Then why did you call me dumb in front of little sister? Xiaoyichen pursed his lips and said, If little sister finds out that I'm dumb and bullies me when I grow up, then no one will dote on me and love me. How old is little sister? How would she understand if I called you dumb? Since little sister doesn't understand, then I'll continue to speak ill of you in the future. Anyway, Daddy has already said that little sister is too young to understand. At this moment his mind was spinning rapidly. Mu Yaja couldn't argue with him, so he could only take a step back and say, Daddy was wrong. Daddy won't call you dumb in the future. Xiaoyichen was finally satisfied. His eyes were sharp as he curiously ran over to Yueyao. He stared straight at the shiny silver longevity lock around her neck and asked curiously, What is this? A longevity lock. Yun Shirshir explained the meaning of the longevity lock to him. Chapter 3186. I have one. Mommy told me that she gave it to me when I was 1 year old. But I'm allergic to it, so I don't wear it often. Xiaoyichen was even more dejected. He lowered his head dejectedly. When Mu Yaja saw this, he felt a little upset. He owed this little guy too much. He admitted that ever since Muichen was born, the Mu family had provided him with the best food and clothing. However, among the 3 children, the Mu family had given him the least care and attention. Not to mention the longevity lock, Mu Yaja rarely participated in Xiaoyichen's birthday. He rarely planned or prepared anything for him. Most of the time, it was the servants who prepared everything and reminded him in advance. Then, he would send someone to buy a birthday present. If Xiaoyichen wanted something, he would send someone to buy it for him. Muichen's personality was actually very lively. This could be seen when he was 1 year old. However, at that time, Mu Yaja didn't have much experience in taking care of children. He was also very strict with him. Children loved to play and were very active. Sometimes it was normal for him to accidentally bump into things or break things. However, at that time, Mu Yaja did not know how to educate his son. Sometimes he was so concerned that his son would break something. He was worried that he would hurt himself again if he was careless again. Hence, he punished him by making him face the wall to reflect on his mistakes. However, the child subconsciously thought that he had caused trouble and made Mu Yaja unhappy. He didn't realize that this was a father's concern. After all, the child was still young. In terms of understanding, It was difficult for him to understand a father's love and care. It was also difficult for him to understand the concern of an elder. When he was a little older, Wuxia threw him into the special training camp to suffer. After returning from the special training camp, Xiaoqian seemed to have changed into a different person. He went from being lively and active to being reserved like a little iceberg. In reality, he was just trying to equip himself. When the mother and son reunited and returned to Yun Shishir's side, his most primitive honesty and innocence gradually revealed itself. Why else would it be said that when it came to family, no matter who the child left, the child couldn't do it? His father was his backer, his sense of security. Mother is the harbor, the greatest warmth. Without any one of them, home would no longer be home. Looking at Xiaoqian's disappointed face, Wuxia realized that he had always neglected Xiaoqian. In the past, it was because he was a new father and did not know how to manage the relationship between him and his child. When the mother and son reunited, he returned to Yun Shishir's side and spent time with Yu. Xiaoqian considered himself to be the older brother, so he learned to be mature and knew how to take care of Yu. However, everyone had forgotten that even though Xiaoqian was the older brother, he was only a few minutes older than Yu. Furthermore, he was only 7 years old. The crybaby got candy, but the mature one's feelings were always neglected. Wuxia didn't know what his daddy was thinking. When he saw that his daddy was looking at him, he thought that he was being willful. He immediately said, "Aya, I didn't say that I must have a longevity lock. I was just teasing daddy. Come here." Wuxia called out to him. His tone instantly became gentle. Xiaoqian was a little bashful. "What's wrong?" Chapter 3187. Come here. When Wuxia called again, Xiaoqian walked over awkwardly. Wuxia held his hand and pulled him in front of him. Then, he brushed his hair aside and planted a kiss on his forehead. "Daddy will make it up to you, okay?" Xiaoqian's face turned strangely red all of a sudden. He thought to himself, what's wrong with daddy? Why is he being so gentle to me for no reason? He couldn't get used to it. Upon hearing that he was going to make it up to him, Xiaoqian was naturally delighted. He quickly nodded and said, Okay. This way my sister Yu and I will all have longevity locks. When Yun Shishir heard this, she thought it was a little strange. She rebuked him and said, Didn't you give Xiaoqian a longevity lock when he was 1 year old? She had wanted to give Yueyao a longevity lock when he was 1 year old. It was too early for the 100-day banquet, so she wasn't in a hurry to give it to him. However, she didn't expect this man to give Yueyao one even though he didn't seem to care. She was a little surprised by his thoughtfulness. However, when she heard that Xiaoqian didn't have one, she was a little surprised. She thought that Xiaoqian had one but he wouldn't wear it like Yu. However, Wuxia said, I didn't know there was such a thing as a longevity lock. You're a father after all. You can't ignore the older ones. Otherwise, you'll be suspected of being biased. Yun Shishir harumphed. She was obviously on Xiaoqian's side. Wuxia humbly listened to her advice. Madam is right. Yun Shishir was amused when she heard this. She and Xiaoqian looked at each other and smiled. At night, the family showered and went to bed. Yun Shishir lifted the blanket and moved towards Wuxia. She hugged him and said, Hubby. Don't you think that you didn't care enough for Xiaoqian when he was young? Wuxia nodded and heard her say, Today, I saw Xiaoqian's face looking a little lonely when he saw that little Yueyao also had a longevity lock. My heart aches when I look at it. There was a hint of reproach in her tone. Wuxia patted her back gently, but didn't deny it. When Wuxian was young, I really didn't care much about him. At that time, there weren't any capable assistants in the consortium. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shen were still young and inexperienced, so I had to take care of a lot of work. Hence, I rarely had time to spare on him. Yun Shishir expressed her understanding. After all, no matter how capable a man was, he didn't have 3 heads and 6 arms, nor was he made of iron. From a certain point of view, Wuxia was indeed good at educating children, but it was also remarkable. At least, Xiaoqian wasn't like those spoiled rich second-generation heirs. This proved that Wuxia had put in a lot of effort in educating children. However, as a father's love wasn't as gentle as a mother's. She had been absent from Xiaoqian's childhood. Without a mother's love, she felt guilty. Wuxia continued, Perhaps it's because the circumstances are different now. At that time, Xiaoqin's definition of me was that I had this child under Grandpa's orders to continue the family line. But now that I think about it, I feel guilty. Chapter 3188. Wuxia said, "As a father, I didn't fulfill my responsibilities. But I'll be more careful in the future. I don't want the little guy to feel neglected again." As he spoke, he covered her with a thin blanket. The weather had turned cold, and he was worried that she would catch a cold. She took note of his silent thoughtfulness. She hugged his shoulders and planted a kiss on the corner of his lips. "Good night." The next day, when Wuxia got off work, he went to the jewelry store and chose a longevity lock of another design. When he got home, he didn't carry Yueyao as he usually did. Instead, he carried the gift box mysteriously and walked to his room. Xiaoqin was playing a game on his phone. When he walked over, he saw that he was controlling an exquisite character to push a tower. Wuxia didn't know what game it was, but he didn't disturb him. When the word victory appeared on the screen, Xiaoqin turned around and was shocked by the man who suddenly appeared behind him. "Daddy!" He was so scared that he patted his chest lightly with his hand and said with lingering fear, "Daddy, why are you standing behind me without saying anything? When did you come back?" "Not long ago. I saw that you were playing a game, so I didn't disturb you." Wuxia patted his head and asked, "What game are you playing?" "Oh," Wuxia continued, "you won't understand even if I tell you. Have you heard of Mobile Legends?" Wuxia raised his eyebrows. He didn't play games, so how could he have heard of this game? Xiaoqin obediently put his phone in the drawer and kept it well. He usually played games very happily, but he knew when to stop. When the whole family was around, he would never play with his phone continuously. After all, the only time the whole family could gather together was at night. Xiaoqin only played games when he was bored. When the whole family was around, he wouldn't play. Yu was the same. No matter how busy he was, he would put down all his work as soon as Wuxia returned home. Wuxia took out a box from his pocket and opened it in front of him. Xiaoqin looked at him curiously as he took out a longevity lock from the box and strung it with a red string. "This is..." Xiaoqin was pleasantly surprised. "Is this the longevity lock you put on your sister yesterday?" "Yeah." Wuxia continued. "Daddy was careless in the past and forgot to put one on you." Little Ichin glanced at him reproachfully from the corner of his eyes before his lips curled into a warm smile. "It's not bad that you remembered to put one on me now." He stood up and obediently stood in front of Wuxia. He was now as tall as the man's waist, but for the sake of convenience, Wuxia still had to kneel on one knee in front of him and fasten the longevity lock around his neck. After he fastened it, Xiaoqin pinched the longevity lock with a satisfied smile on his face. "Thank you, Daddy." He hugged his shoulders and gently kissed him on the cheek. Wuxia suddenly thought of something. "Xiaoqin, I have something to discuss with you." "Yeah. I'm going to try on gowns with Mommy tomorrow. You and Yu stay at home and take good care of your sister, okay?" Chapter 3189. Wuxia flicked him on the forehead. "Idiot. What other gown could it be? Of course, it's Mommy's gown for the wedding." Xiaoqin held his forehead in pain. However, his eyes lit up when he heard that they were going to try on the gown for the wedding. "Wow. Have you decided on the wedding plan?" "Yes. Your mommy and I agreed that it would be more meaningful to have the wedding in a traditional Chinese style." Xiaoqin was surprised. "A traditional Chinese style? Does that mean that Daddy is going to wear a very loose traditional Chinese costume like the ones on TV? The planner suggested that I wear a suit and she wear a traditional Chinese costume." Wuxia added, "Your little sister can't be alone at home, so I won't be bringing you guys along. When we come back, I'll show you how the gown will look like." Xiaoqin clapped his hands happily. "During dinner, Wuxia told you about this." Yu was overjoyed when he heard that he would be at home taking care of his little sister. He promised that he would take good care of his little sister. Wuxia was very assured that the two little rascals would be guarding little Yueyao. Hence, the next day he left the house very early with Yun Shishir. Xiaoqin woke up very early, but Yu woke up even earlier than him. He was already in the living room and was holding little Yueyao in his arms. Xiaoqin felt a little indignant when he saw this. "Why are you up so early?" I went to bed earlier than you, so naturally I woke up earlier. As Yu said this, he thought that if he didn't wake up earlier, Xiaoqian would hold little Yao first. Would he still have a chance then? He couldn't beat him, so he could only take the initiative. Xiaoqian pursed his lips and sat down beside Yu. He looked at Yao, who was still sleeping, in his arms. When he saw the little girl nestled in his arms, he couldn't help but want to tease her. Thus he took the sterilized pacifier and rubbed it against her mouth. In her dreams, Yao could vaguely feel a familiar shape. She subconsciously opened her small cherry mouth and licked it. Then she sucked on the pacifier with her eyes closed, enjoying the taste. Ha! Yu was amused by her adorable reaction. He looked at Xiaoqian and smiled. Suddenly he thought of something and asked, "Has little sister's favorite toy been sterilized?" "Not yet." "Go," Yu hurriedly urged. "When little sister wakes up, it will be too late for her to play with her toys." Xiaoqian was extremely unwilling to be sent to work. He still wanted to see his little sister's sleeping face. Such a beautiful sleeping face was monopolized by this fellow. How could he not feel good in his heart? However, on second thought, Xiaoqian still went happily when he remembered that he was working for his little sister. When he was done sterilizing the toy and came back with it, little Yao had already woken up. Yu carried her to the crib, then took a hot towel and carefully wiped her face. Little Yao had a full sleep, so she was especially energetic. She kicked her legs as if she was pedaling a bicycle. At this moment, the sun had risen outside the window. Chapter 3190. Okay. But we'll have to wait until we're done feeding her and changing her diapers. Yu nodded. The two little guys busied themselves again. After they were done feeding her and changing her diapers, they placed little Yao in the stroller. Then they placed little Yao's favorite toy in the stroller and pushed it out the door. Although the stroller wasn't tall, Yu wasn't as tall as Xiaoqian, so Xiaoqian was in charge of pushing the stroller. Yun Shishir had moved to Yunshan Shuri to take care of her pregnancy. After she returned home from the confinement center, the whole family moved back to Xiangti Walk. The main reason was that Xiangti Walk was a bungalow with a garden, so it wasn't very big. Moreover, she missed the garden full of Chinese roses. After living there for so long, she had gotten used to living there. Xiangti Walk had a huge garden. The residents who lived there would take a stroll in the garden every morning when the weather was good. Xiaoqian pushed the stroller and walked halfway out the door. Suddenly he thought of something and said, "Oh, I forgot to bring my milk bottle. I'll go back and get it." Yu nodded and pushed the stroller to the side of the stone bench. Then he sat on the stone bench. In the stroller, little Yao hugged the toy with both hands. She loved it so much that she couldn't put it down. Her clear black and white eyes seemed to have a mind of their own. As she blinked, her eyelashes fluttered like the wings of a butterfly. She was extremely mesmerizing. Yu was mesmerized just by looking at her blinking eyes. She was so mesmerized by the toy that she was playing with it. It was as though she was extremely satisfied with the toy in her hands. Children were especially innocent by nature, and were easily satisfied. Yu lay beside the stroller and lowered her head to watch her play. Unlike other children, the little Yao was especially quiet. Usually when she had a toy in her hand, she would ignore everything else around her. She would hug the toy and play with it for a long time. Yu felt a little lonely, so he said to her, "Yao, oh Yao, is this toy that fun?" He was a little jealous. Although he was the one who designed the toy, he felt a sense of accomplishment seeing how much his sister liked the toy he designed. But then again, little Yao just hugged the toy and played with it lovingly. She didn't even look at him. When he talked to her, she ignored him. She didn't even look at him. He felt defeated. He gently poked her chubby little face with his finger. Little Yao immediately reached out and pushed his hand away. Her other hand gripped the toy tightly, as though she was afraid that someone would snatch it from her. Seeing this, Yu reached out to grab it. Little Yao's face immediately revealed a fierce expression. She hugged the toy tightly with both hands with an overbearing expression that said, "You're not allowed to snatch my toy." This expression actually resembled Daddy's. Sometimes when Daddy was angry, he would frown and glare fiercely at people, just like her expression now. Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw her expression. The more he wanted to tease her, the more he reached out to grab the toy from her arms. Chapter 3191. She was quite stubborn. If it had been any other child, they would have burst into tears by now. However, it was said that this sister of his didn't like to cry and rarely shed tears. She would only cry when she was feeling uncomfortable or hungry. Yu raised the toy and said with a smile, "If you have the ability, come and snatch it from me." Little Yao seemed to understand his words. She wrinkled her little nose and waved her hands, touching the pull tab on the crib. The pram was very well equipped. In order to train the baby's ability to sit, it was equipped with a very sturdy pull tab. When little Yao saw the pull tab, it was as if she had seen a new world. She pulled on the pull tab and lifted her upper body slightly. Her legs kicked and she actually sat up straight. Yu was completely stunned. Little Yao wasn't even 6 months old yet. The confinement nanny had said that the child would only be able to learn how to sit up independently when she was 6 months old. However, it hadn't even been 6 months and she was already sitting up on her own. Yu was extremely surprised. Took him a while to react. He exclaimed to Yao, "Yao, you can actually sit up on your own." He was a little excited and even more amazed that little Yao could actually sit up on her own. He was extremely excited. However, little Yao did not seem to understand his words. Her gaze was still fixed on the toy in his hand. Her 2 little hands reached out wanting to grab the toy. "All right. I won't snatch it, I won't snatch it. Here you go." Yu immediately handed the toy over. However, her little legs were still kicking so hard that the toy was sent flying a few meters away. Seeing that the toy had been sent flying, Yu stood up to retrieve it. Suddenly he thought of something and immediately turned around. He first fixed the wheels of the pram and then turned back. He saw that an 8-year-old boy had already bent down to pick up the toy. He smiled knowingly, walked over and smiled at the boy. "Thank you." The boy raised his head and looked at him strangely. He asked, "Why are you thanking me? Aren't you picking up toys for me?" Yu looked at the toy in his hand and said, "If you help me, I'll definitely have to thank you." The boy looked down at the toy. It was a rainbow pony. He had never seen this toy before, so he hugged it tightly and refused to let go. When Yu saw this, she immediately said, "This is my sister's toy." The little boy rudely interrupted him. "I don't care whose toy it is. Just because you say it's yours, it's yours. I picked it up, so it's mine." Yu did not expect him to be so unreasonable. He wanted to take his sister's toy for himself. "Please return the toy to me." The boy snorted and turned to leave. Seeing that he was being so unreasonable, Yu immediately rushed up and grabbed his sleeve. The boy turned around, frowned, and pushed him violently to the ground. "I said that I picked it up, so it's mine. Didn't you hear me?" Caught off guard, Yu was pushed to the ground. She was in so much pain that her eyebrows were twisted. Seeing this, the boy didn't feel that he had done anything wrong. Chapter 3192. Seeing that Yu was in pain from the fall, Yao knew that he was not feeling well. She was probably afraid as well, for she was so frightened that her face turned red and she started crying. Sob, sob, sob. Seeing that she was crying, the boy did not think much of it. He took the toy and was about to leave. But how could Yu let him go? This toy was Yao's favorite. As her older brother, he naturally saw it as his responsibility to protect his younger sister. Hence he quickly got up from the ground. Before he could even pat the dust off his body, he stood in front of the boy and opened his arms, preventing him from leaving. "Return the toy to my younger sister." "Why should I?" The boy was sloppy and looked like a little emperor who had been spoiled by his family. He was rude and unreasonable. "Come and take it from me if you can." When Yu heard this, he really pounced on him and tried to snatch the toy back. The boy immediately raised the toy high. After all, he was an 8-year-old child and his height was about the same as Xiaoyi Chen's. He was much taller than Yu, so he could not reach the toy even if he stood on his tiptoes. He said angrily, "Hurry up and return the toy to me. Otherwise, I won't go easy on you." When the boy heard this, he frowned and reached out to push him. "You won't go easy on me? How are you going to go easy on me?" With each push, Yu took a step back. The boy seemed to think that Yu was thin and petite, but he looked delicate and weak. He seemed to think that he was easy to bully. Hence, He was particularly arrogant and pushed him back forcefully. Behind Yu was a flight of stairs. His heel tripped on the stairs and he fell onto the lawn. Yu was so angry that his eyes were red. He was extremely indignant. What made him angrier was that someone had bullied Yao and him, but he could not retaliate at all. He felt that he was too weak and could not protect Yao. When he thought of this, he felt especially aggrieved, and his eyes turned red. Xiaoqian came back with the milk bottle. From afar he could hear Yao crying loudly. He thought that Yao was going to drink milk, so he immediately ran over. However, he saw Yu being pushed onto the lawn. Beside him, an 8-year-old boy was casually pulling up weeds from the ground and throwing them at him. "What are you doing?" Xiaoqian immediately walked over and pushed him away. When he turned around, he saw Yu lying on the ground and immediately reached out to help him up. "Yu, what do you think? Are you hurt?" The boy sized up Xiaoqian and was a little surprised. The child in front of him was different from Yu's thin and small frame. He was tall and well-built, and he was wearing a short-sleeved shirt that revealed his arms. Even though he was only 8 years old, one could already see the clear lines of his muscles. However, the two children looked very similar, as if they were cast from the same mold. They were like fierce little lions. When Yu saw him, he stubbornly endured the humiliation and did not say a word. However, when he saw the corner of his shirt and dirty pants, he knew that his little brother had been bullied. Xiaoqian turned around and glared fiercely at the boy. He ordered righteously, "You, apologize to my little brother." "Why should I apologize? You bullied my little brother, so you should apologize." Yu said to Xiaoqian, "Brother, he even bullied little sister and stole her toys." Chapter 3193. The boy only got a shock when he walked up to Xiaoqian, who was standing in front of him, was half a head taller than him. Little Chen looked down at him condescendingly. His eyes filled with fury. "I asked you to apologize. Did you hear me?" His deep voice was almost roaring into the boy's ears. The boy's eardrums hurt from the roar. However, his mouth was still sharp as he retorted, "Why? Why should I?" The boy was already feeling guilty. He clenched his fists and couldn't help but feel unsteady on his feet. After all, in front of Xiaoqian's domineering aura, his aura was instantly crushed. However, even though his aura had weakened, his mouth was still as stubborn as a leopard whose territory had been invaded. However, it was impossible for him to lower his head. At home, he had always been treated like an emperor. Ever since he was young, no one had dared to speak to him so loudly and with such a fierce tone. He lifted his head to look at Xiaoqian. His neck straightened as though he couldn't accept it. He sneered. "Who do you think you are? Why should you speak to me like that?" At the side, little Yao was still crying hard. She rubbed her eyes and cried until her voice was hoarse. Yu immediately walked over and picked her up. He gently patted her back and comforted her. Perhaps little Yao's aggrieved and heartbroken cries had triggered him, but Chen immediately grabbed him by the collar and pulled him in front of him. He said to him word by word, "I'm warning you. If you don't apologize, don't even think about leaving this place." The boy was completely frightened. His eyes reddened and sparkled as though he was going to cry in the next second. "I won't. Return the toy to my sister. Don't touch my sister's toy with your dirty hands." Xiaoqian snatched the toy away from the boy without giving him a chance to explain himself. When the boy saw this, he was completely subdued by Xiaoqian's aura. He was so frightened that he fell to the ground and burst into tears. Not far away, a woman dressed elegantly walked over. She seemed to be the boy's mother. Originally, she took her son for a walk. On the way, they met a friend and stopped to chat. However, the boy was naughty and walked alone in the garden, which led to the series of events that just happened. The woman walked over and saw her precious baby sitting on the ground, wailing aggrievedly. Chen, on the other hand, was standing in front of him with a determined expression. Thinking that he had bullied her baby, she immediately walked over and gave him a push. "Why are you bullying my son?" Chen was stunned when he heard this. Yu walked over with Yao, who was crying non-stop. She said angrily, "Auntie, please get this straight. It's obvious that you didn't discipline your son well. Your son was rude and domineering outside and bullied others. Why are you making the accusation? Even if it's your own dog, shouldn't it know how to keep a leash when it goes out? If it runs around and bites people, it'll be too late for regrets. Xiaoqian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Yu's mouth was really vicious. On the surface, she seemed to be talking about the dog, but wasn't she implying that there was a problem with her education? When the woman heard this, she was stunned for a long time. She couldn't believe that such words would come out of the mouth of an 8-year-old child. Chapter 3194. Before Xiaoqian could open his mouth, Yu Yu retorted harshly, "What I'm about to say isn't human language. How are you going to understand it? Or are you calling yourself a B*****? Auntie, if you have the heart, you should spend less time taking care of your old face. Instead, you should think about how to educate your son so that he won't turn into a dog and bite people." Little Chen was so impressed by her words that he wanted to prostrate himself on the ground and praise her in his heart. How could he retaliate gracefully? This was a textbook example. He didn't use any vulgarities, but every word he said was vicious. As expected, when the woman heard this, her face turned green and red. Instinctively, she raised her hand and wanted to give him a tight slap. However, she immediately realized that the two people in front of her were children. As an adult, if she were to hit her children, people would gossip. At the very least, she should look for their parents to reason with them. Which family are you from? I'm going to look for your parents later to talk about this. You're so young, but your words are so vicious. You don't have any manners at all. The truth is always harsh to the ears. Manners? It's not up to you to judge whether I have any manners or not. You can't even discipline your own son well, so how can you discipline others? Yu Yu paused and said, "That's right. I can't expect you to discipline your own son well. The next generation will be the same as the adults. It's obvious from your son's character. I'm sure you won't be any better." As he said this, Yu Yu tugged at Xiaoqian's arm and said to him, "Brother, let's go." Xiaoqian nodded. The two of them didn't even look at her as they carried Yue Yao into the pram. After this incident, they weren't in the mood to take a leisurely stroll. They were planning to go home. When the woman saw this, she immediately walked over and wanted to say something. However, Muichen had completely lost his patience. He turned around and viciously kicked the trash can at the side. Clang. This valiant kick actually dented the metal door of the trash can. The woman was completely dumbfounded. Muichen said to her, "Get lost. Otherwise, I won't be polite." The woman was so frightened that she couldn't speak. She had never seen such a valiant child who could kick the trash can into such a state. While she was still in a daze, Xiaoqian and Yu Yu had already pushed the pram and walked far away. When they returned, Yu Yu to quickly change her. Xiaoqian said that he would be responsible for his sisters, and urged Yu to hurry and change to change. Xiaoqian said he was going to comfort his sister, so he urged Yu to change quickly. Yu Yu's clothes were dirty, especially the back of his butt, which was stained with dust and mud. When Yu Yu returned to his room, he took off his dirty clothes and changed into a clean set of clothes. When he was changing, he noticed that there were a few bruises on his thigh. His skin was very tender, so when he was pinched a little harder, there would be bruises. Now that he had fallen so hard, there were even bruises. However, he didn't take it to heart. He was worried about Yue Yao. When he went out and saw that Yue Yao had stopped crying, he was relieved. Muichen was good at coaxing his sister. He couldn't coax her no matter how hard he tried. He was smart enough to clean the toys and disinfect them before placing them in her arms. Chapter 3195. In the afternoon, Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir returned. A certain man had just returned and had yet to take off his jacket when he hurriedly ran to the crib. However, little Yue Yao wasn't inside. It turned out that the two little guys were holding little Yue Yao and sunbathing in the back garden. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir tiptoed to the balcony and saw Xiaoqian sitting upright with little Yue Yao in his arms. Yu Yu was sitting at the door, holding a drawing board and seriously sketching. Yu Yu had been very talented in drawing since he was young. He had never specially learned it because he spent most of his time in the hospital or at home. Hence, he had plenty of time and patience to hold a drawing board and carefully sketch a scene. When he was 5 years old, his sketches were actually quite decent. It was as if he was self-taught. Mu Yaja deliberately didn't disturb him. When Xiaoqian saw him, His expression changed. However, he gestured for him to keep quiet and stood behind Yu. Looking at his drawing, he already had a rough outline, but there were no shadows, so the figure wasn't very three-dimensional. Yu held the brush and said calmly, "Daddy, how long are you going to stand behind me?" Wuxia was shocked. "How did you know that I'm standing behind you?" Yu turned around speechlessly and looked at him with a defeated expression. "Daddy, do you think I'm deaf? Can't I hear you? Or do you think you're a god who floated all the way here?" Wuxia was amused by him. However, Wuxia was attentive. When he saw that Yu's palm seemed to have some scratches, he immediately grabbed his hand and examined it carefully. "What happened? Why are you scratched?" Yu didn't expect his eyes to be so sharp. He said calmly, "I accidentally fell. It's fine." "Where? Let me take a look." Wuxia also hurried over. She held his small hand and looked at it. Seeing that it was only a little abrasion and was not serious, she was relieved. "Why aren't you more careful?" Yu put down the drawing board and asked, "Have you taken the photos?" "What picture?" "Stupid daddy. Of course it's the photo of mommy trying on the gown." Yu looked helpless. "Daddy, your reaction is so slow." Wuxia furrowed his brows. He was both annoyed and amused by the other's mischievous look. Shaoichen walked over with little Yueyao in his arms. Little Yueyao was basking comfortably in the sun, and when she saw them return, she became excited. When Shaoichen walked closer with her in his arms, little Yueyao couldn't wait to reach out her arms and ask for a hug. This action of hers, however, made Wuxia feel strange. All along, she had thought that her daughter was quite cold and aloof. Usually, when people wanted to hug her, not only did they have to seek permission from Shaoichen and Yu, but they also had to seek her opinion. If someone reached out to hug her, she would sometimes look away and turn her face away. This was a sign that she didn't want to be hugged. However, what Wuxia didn't know was that little Yueyao had suffered a lot today. Hence, when she saw them return, she was especially attentive and wanted to hug them for comfort. Wuxia's heart almost melted when he saw her asking for a hug. Chapter 3196. If someone reached out to hug her, she would sometimes look away and turn her little face away. This was a sign that she did not want to be hugged. However, what Wuxia did not know was that little Yueyao had been wronged today. Therefore, when she saw them return, she was especially attentive and wanted to hug them for comfort. Wuxia's heart almost melted when he saw her asking for a hug. In the past, the CEO, who was known for his cold and aloof image in front of the employees of the Shengyu Corporation, had to lower himself and immediately carry the little princess in his arms. Wuxia hugged little Yueyao in his arms, feeling extremely satisfied. Little Yueyao could always evoke infinite tenderness in his heart. Only when he hugged her in his arms did he feel that he truly had the whole world. With such a beautiful daughter, he had no regrets in life. As Wuxia coaxed her, he asked gently, "Yueyao, give daddy a kiss, okay?" Yueyao nestled comfortably in his arms, her two little hands curled into little fists. When she heard his voice, she blinked as if she did not understand. However, her pair of watery eyes were extremely lovable. Wuxia could not help but lower his head and gently peck her little mouth. It had to be said that this kind of mouth-to-mouth kiss was an exclusive right of lovers. However, Yueyao was still so young, and he could not help but kiss her. However, this action was a pure act of a father who loved his daughter to the bone. When Yu was young, Wuxia often kissed his little mouth. However, when Yu was 4 years old, she was a little more concerned about this. It was always said that men were different people before and after they fell in love. Before and after they got married, they also had different mentalities. However, most of the people who truly transformed into a responsible man were only after they became fathers. However, there was definitely a process during this process. After 10 months of pregnancy and breastfeeding, a man would truly become mature. For some reason, Wuxia felt that ever since Yueyao was born and Wuxia officially became a stay-at-home dad, he became especially beautiful. In the morning, no matter how hurried he was, he would always kiss and hug Yueyao before leaving. When she got home from work, the first thing she did was to run to Yueyao's crib and hug her. Even if he was woken up by Yueyao's cries in the middle of the night, he didn't complain. He always rushed to do the dirty and tiring work. Yoon Shurshur felt that she must have saved the galaxy in her previous life to be able to meet a man who treated her like a treasure in this life. Not every man would understand his wife's hardships. Not all men could dote on their wives like a princess without any complaints. However, this kind of doting was not affected by Yu Yao's birth in the slightest. Sometimes she seriously wondered if she was having a long dream. When she woke up one morning and woke up from the dream, this man would only be a part of her dream. She was glad that all of this was not a dream. Even if it was a dream, it was a beautiful dream that she would never wake up from. Yoon Shurshur turned on her phone and showed the two little guys the photo she took. Yu snatched the phone first and looked at the photo. Yoon Shurshur was wearing an extremely gorgeous Han-Tang wedding dress. They were really stunned. Chapter 3197. As the saying went, a phoenix coronet and a red gown was a beautiful sight. Yoon Shurshur was wearing a red wedding gown and a phoenix coronet with tassels. It was hard to hide her elegance and beauty. Her bright and colorful tassels drew a beautiful arc on her forehead. Her gilded hair swayed as she swayed. Her smooth and soft chin, her bright red lips, and the flirtatious and fiery red flower at the corner of her eyes were incomparably sparkling. With just a glance, she was devastatingly beautiful. Wow! Mommy is so beautiful. Think about it. Mommy relies on her looks to make a living. What about Daddy? Yu asked curiously. Is Daddy really wearing a suit? Won't that make him incompatible with Mommy? At the mention of this, Yoon Shurshur didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The wedding planner had originally suggested that Wuxia wear a suit while she wore a Han-Tang wedding gown. This kind of wedding would give people the feeling of a cross-century marriage. However, in reality, the wedding planner was worried that Wuxia wouldn't be able to pull off the ancient style of clothing. A man's Han Chinese costume was different from a woman's. Ordinary men wouldn't be able to pull off a Han Chinese costume to look good. Why else would people say that the handsome men of ancient times were truly handsome men with red lips, white teeth, straight eyebrows and starry eyes? Suits were one of the greatest inventions in the world. Most men, as long as they were tall enough, would not look too ugly in a suit. However, a Han Chinese costume was different. The wedding planner was worried that Wuxia wouldn't be able to pull off a Han Chinese costume. That was why he had suggested it. However, when the two of them arrived at the venue and the stylist saw Wuxia in person, she was slightly stunned by his exquisite facial features. In the entertainment industry, he would definitely be a popular young actor. Hence, she said, Chairman Mu, why don't you try on a Han Chinese costume? Wuxia changed into a Han Chinese costume and walked out. When everyone saw him, they were completely stunned. A handsome man. Wuxia's exquisite facial features were perfect for the traditional Chinese clothing. He even won over the extremely picky stylist. Hence, the wedding planner decided that both of them would wear traditional Chinese clothing. Yu did not believe that her father could look so good in Han Chinese clothing. She had heard her mother describe it so vividly. She had to see it with her own eyes. There was only one photo of Wuxia wearing a traditional Chinese costume, and it was taken under her compulsion. Yoon Shurshur found it and showed it to Yu and Xiaoyichen. When Yu saw it, he was speechless. It was indeed beautiful. Since Yu had achieved perfection, Xiaoyichen had also achieved perfection. In the evening, the family of five finished dinner and planned to stroll around the nearby park. Yu suddenly recalled what had happened in the afternoon, and was still a little angry. However, just as they were about to leave, Lu Jinyu called and said that he had a document to send over. Wuxia snorted coldly in his heart. He said that he was sending a document. Perhaps he was coveting his little princess. Before long, someone knocked on the door. Wuxia was a little surprised. He had just finished the call and the person was already at the door? Did he arrive on a rocket? Wuxia was carrying Yao, so it was not convenient for him to open the door. Yoon Shurshur walked over and opened the door. She saw a woman and a man of average height standing outside the door. The woman was holding a child's hand. She was dressed elegantly, but she looked very fierce. Yoon Shurshur had just opened the door when the woman, holding the child's hand, barged in fiercely. Chapter 3198. Just as the woman walked in, the man behind her walked in as well. He first nodded at Yoon Shurshur as a form of greeting before asking the woman, "Are you mistaken? Are you sure it's this family?" The woman walked in and looked around. When her gaze landed on Xiaoqian and Yu, she immediately became agitated. It's them. It's these two rascals. When Yu and Xiaoqian saw her, they immediately recognized her as the unreasonable woman from the afternoon. They were furious. He hadn't settled the score with her yet, but she still dared to come knocking on his door. Muyaja was carrying Yueyao. When he saw the woman's aggressive manner, as if she was here to cause trouble, he frowned slightly. The woman's heart skipped a beat when she saw Muyaja. It was probably because she had never seen such a young and handsome stay-at-home dad. Seeing him carrying a 5-month-old baby girl in his arms, she could not help but feel her heart skip a beat. This scene had touched her deeply. She had never seen a father so patiently carrying and comforting a baby. In addition to her 8-year-old son, she had given birth to a daughter 10 years ago. However, her husband had always been cold toward this daughter. It was precisely because her husband's family was considered prominent in the capital that they valued boys over girls. Therefore, when she gave birth to a daughter, her husband's family complained a lot. They even used their connections to get her to give birth to another child. However, when she got married, she was already 28 years old. When she gave birth to her daughter, she was already 31 years old. At this point in time, she was already considered an advanced pregnant woman. However, her husband said that she had to have a child. Who would inherit such a huge family business? She could only grit her teeth and bear with the grievances. She painstakingly carried the baby for 10 months. During the pregnancy, it was discovered that it was a daughter. She even had to undergo an abortion. Finally, a son was born. Her husband's family was satisfied. This made her husband's family overjoyed. However, she was the only one who knew the pain and suffering she had to go through. However, she had no choice. She didn't work and relied entirely on her husband to support her. She had to eat every time she opened and closed her mouth. Her husband had never been stingy with her food and clothes. In her heart, it seemed that only by doing this could she be considered a qualified wife. However, her daughter was pitiful. Ever since she was born, other than her and the nanny, no one cared about her. This husband of hers loved his son to the bone. He hugged him every day and talked about his son, but he didn't care about their daughter at all. Compared to this man, who was holding his daughter with such tenderness, she felt her heart ache when she saw this scene. Therefore, this son of his had always lived a life of luxury. He was held in the palm of his hand, spoiled to the point of lawlessness like a little emperor. However, because her son was favored, her status in her husband's family also rose a lot. "Auntie, so it's you." Yu put her hands on her hips angrily and said coldly, "What are you doing? Are you here to apologize?" "Apologize?" The woman immediately came back to her senses and said angrily, "Shouldn't you be the one apologizing?" Yun Shirshir stepped forward and asked, "What happened? You're this child's parent, right?" The woman glared at her fiercely. Pointing at Xiaoqian, she said malevolently, "Do you know how to discipline your son? He's already learning how to hit people at such a young age. Now that he's like this, what will happen when he grows up?" Chapter 3199. That's right. He's the one who hit my son. The woman panted with rage as she exaggerated the entire incident. She even added fuel to the fire and accused Xiaoqian of hitting her precious son. Yun Shirshir's expression remained calm when she heard this. If Yu had gone out to bully others, that might not have been the case. However, Xiaoqian was such an honest child. He knew that he was strong, so he rarely had physical contact with other children his age. This was because he knew that he was strong and would hurt other children. Moreover, if Xiaoqian had really hit her son, would the little guy still be standing there unharmed? "Xiaoqian, what exactly happened? Aren't you going to explain it to mommy?" Yun Shirshir asked gently. However, the woman did not seem to care. "Do you even need to ask? If you ask him, he won't admit it. This child is very mischievous. If you don't teach him a lesson, he'll cause you trouble when he grows up." In front of Muyaja, the woman's words were considered polite. However, Yun Shirshir was displeased. "Don't judge my child like that. Who do you think you are? I asked my son to explain it to you. Did I ask you? He won't admit it. First of all, he won't lie to me." Yun Shirshir paused for a moment before she continued. "If a mother doesn't believe her own child's words, Then who else can she believe? Yu and Muichen were both touched and exhilarated when they heard this. Even though Yun Shirshir did not say it explicitly, they knew what her attitude would be. However, they were very touched to see her retaliate so fiercely in front of such a vicious woman. You! The woman wanted to say something, but Mu Yaja did not have the patience to listen. Shut up. He asked Xiao Chen. What exactly happened? He bullied Yu. Little Yichen said matter-of-factly. Yu said that his sister's toy fell on the ground. He picked it up and wanted to keep it for himself. He said that since he picked it up, it's his. He even pushed Yu. He was the one who started it. Moreover, I didn't hit him. I only asked him to apologize to Yu. He was scared to tears because he was timid. Why should I be blamed? Mu Yaja's gaze became dangerous when he heard this. You're lying, the woman said. Hui didn't tell me that. Hui was probably the 8-year-old boy who was standing next to her. She said sternly. What Hui told me was that you pushed him, bullied him and even hit him. Muichen was not happy to entertain her and only said, he's lying. That's enough. The man standing behind the woman had run out of patience. He walked to the table and slammed his palm on the table in front of Mu Yaja. The slap on the table was so serious that it scared the little princess. Little Yuyao's eyes were wide open. Very quickly her face turned red and she was about to cry. Yu thought to himself, oh no, my sister is going to cry again. Mu Yaja immediately patted her back gently and coaxed her gently. Yuyao, don't cry. Daddy will hug you. His voice was so gentle that it was accompanied by a soft moan. Little Yuyao blinked and swallowed her sobs. The woman was stunned again. Chapter 3200. Usually, when the child was about to cry, her man would try his best to get rid of the child. If he didn't hand the child over to the nanny, he would hand the child over to her. In any case, she didn't have the patience to coax the child. She was so stunned that she even ignored the increasingly dangerous look in Mu Yaja's eyes. The man looked up. His voice was low but his tone was strong enough. Get out. Why? The woman spoke with conviction, but she was a little angry. My son was bullied, and I haven't even gotten an explanation. What right do you have to chase us out? The woman's husband seemed to have some background. At least, it was apparent from his aura. From the moment he entered the house, it was obvious that he was proud of his status. Hence, his attitude was very arrogant. After all, his son was bullied, and he wanted to get an explanation for his son. Hence, he wanted to see who had bullied his son to this extent. Once he got home, he locked himself in his room and ignored everyone. His heart ached when he saw this. Hence, he thought that no matter who it was, he had to punish them harshly and show them who was boss. This family also lived in Xiangti Walk. This man's status was indeed quite high. He was the executive director of a real estate developer and was quite wealthy. However, he didn't realize that he was also living in Xiangti Walk. In a territory where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold, as a neighbor, his background was not to be trifled with either. However, most men were arrogant and flamboyant. Naturally, they overlooked this problem. Perhaps he was too conceited. After all, he was able to achieve what he had today. Ordinary people couldn't compare to him. No matter how high his status was, how could he compare to him? Hence, the man was aggressive and said arrogantly, today I'll put these words out there. You can either get your 2 sons who are in the wrong to come out and apologize to my son. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. When Mu Yaja heard this, he found it interesting. He passed the little Yueyao to Muichen. Then, he slowly stood up from the chair and walked to the man. The difference in height made it difficult for the man to breathe. His height of 1.8 meters was like the weight of Mount Tai to the man who was less than 1.7 meters. The man had no choice but to raise his head to look at him. Mu Yaja looked down at him with a cold gaze. As a father, I know my 2 sons' personalities better than anyone else. If they did something wrong, I will definitely correct them and make them apologize. But I know my sons. They won't bully other children. The man couldn't help but feel a little guilty, but he still insisted on keeping up appearances. You weren't there. You said that you wouldn't bully her, but did you see it with your own eyes? So, did you see it with your own eyes? The man was at a loss for words for a moment. If this matter fell into the hands of ordinary people, it would also be a very troublesome trifle. After all, no one was present at the scene. Everyone had their reasons and everyone felt wronged. However, the woman did not give up and said, "I saw it with my own eyes. Your child is grabbing my son's collar fiercely, like a little lion. It looked like it wanted to eat someone. I saw it, how can it not count?" Chapter 32:01. However, the woman said, "My son has everything he wants. We've already bought everything he wants. Why would he care about your lousy toy?" Yu was furious. Lousy toy. This toy couldn't be bought with money. It was a limited edition, and this toy for little Yueyao was a version that he had meticulously designed. It was one of a kind. He had always given his sister the best, but in this woman's mouth it was just a lousy toy. You say he doesn't care about it, but your son does. Yu walked over and tugged at the corner of Muyaja's shirt. She snorted and said, "Daddy, don't stoop to the level of a shrew like her. Just chase them out. It's a waste of time to talk to them." Yun Shirshir suppressed her anger and said, "Please get out." The man beside her didn't say anything. After all, Muyaja was standing in front of him. His aura was suppressed by so much that he didn't dare to make a fuss. However, the woman continued to pester endlessly. "Do you know who my husband is?" These words were really condescending. Muyaja retorted, "Do I need to know? You'd better know who my husband is. Don't think that just because you live in Xiangti Walk like us you have a high status. My husband is the executive director of Wanke Real Estate. You know about Wanke Real Estate, right? It's one of the top 500 companies in the world." When Muyaja heard this, he sneered in his heart. There would always be a few frogs at the bottom of the well who would jump out and embarrass themselves. He wondered who it was. So it was Wanke's director. Speaking of which, even Wanke Xiao Wang Chuanda had to humbly address him as Chairman Mu. When he saw him, he was just a director, yet he was so arrogant. Where did he get his confidence from? Xiaoichen also knew about Wanke. He had even met Wanke Xiao Wang Chuanda. In front of Daddy, he also had a fawning face. Why was this man so arrogant? He said coldly, "He's just a mere director of Wanke. I advise you not to embarrass yourselves here." Yu was surprised and interrupted. "Muichen, you're using idioms one after another. You've improved." Muichen blushed and ignored him. He was in a fit of anger. Get lost if you know what's good for you. It was too embarrassing to be chased out of the house by a child. The man behind couldn't take it anymore. He stood up and said, "Today I was thinking that since we're neighbors it's not a big deal. Let your child apologize and we'll make the big deal small, and the small matter will be resolved. But from what I see, you guys don't seem to have any intention of apologizing at all. Then don't blame me for being rude." Yun Shirshir was curious. "How do you want to be impolite?" The man was about to say something when footsteps came from outside the door. The group of people turned around curiously and saw Lu Jinyu walking over with a document in his hand. When the man saw him, his expression changed and his eyes widened in surprise. His attitude was respectful. "CEO Lu, why are you here?" His words surprised Yun Shirshir. They knew each other. When Lu Jinyu saw him, he was also very surprised. "Director Zhang, why are you here?" The man was also a little confused. Chapter 32:02. Now that the market was in a slump, the global financial system was deteriorating, and the industry was in crisis, it was very difficult for the government to approve land. Without a strong background, it was difficult to get a share of the profits from the government. For a large and powerful corporation like the Wanke Group, they had to bow and lower their posture when they went to the government. But there was nothing they could do. The government refused to give them land. Coincidentally, Wanke coveted an office building, so he took a fancy to the land in the new city. However, this land was auctioned by Shangyu, and they planned to develop the financial street. Therefore, Wanke sent him to communicate with Lu Jinyu, one of the people in charge of Shangyu Corporation, and finally got some ideas. "President Lu, what are you?" Lu Jinyu was also confused by the situation in front of him. Seeing Muyaja standing aside with a cold expression, he smiled and said to the man, "President Zhang, you can't be in such a hurry, right? Didn't I tell you that I'm in charge of this development project? What are you doing?" He thought that Director Zhang had come all the way here to talk to Muyaja about the project. Director Zhang was even more confused and asked, President Liu, what's your relationship with this man? Huh. Lu Jinyu smiled. Don't you know him? I don't know him. I only know that he lives here. Does Director Zhang also live in Xiangti Walk? Yes. Lu Jinyu introduced. This is the chairman of Shengyu Corporation, our boss, President Mu. I didn't expect you to live in the same villa area. I might as well introduce you to him. As soon as he said that, the man was completely stunned, and cold sweat broke out on his back. What did you say? The man pointed at Muyaja and said gloomily, You said this is? I made it very clear just now. Lu Jinyu didn't have the patience to repeat himself a second time. The man was completely frozen on the spot, not knowing how to deal with the situation. Never in his wildest dreams would he have guessed that the legendary mysterious chairman of Shengyu Financial Group, Muyaja, was actually living in the same villa complex as him. He also didn't expect that by accident. He seemed to have offended an extraordinary person. Lu Jinyu also sensed that something was wrong and asked in confusion, What's going on? Uncle Jinyu. Yu ran over and Lu Jinyu immediately picked him up. The little munchkin wrapped his arms around his neck and pointed at the man as he said, Their whole family came to us and said that we bullied their son. They even wanted us to apologize. You're really unreasonable. The woman didn't understand what was going on. She took a step forward and was about to retort when the man was quick to react. He knew how to judge the situation and immediately pulled her behind him. Hubby, what are you doing? The woman asked impatiently. Honey, let me introduce you. The man swallowed his anger and said in a low voice, This is the chairman of Shengyu Financial Group, President Mu. The woman was stunned. She had heard her husband mention the Shengyu Financial Group. It was said that the chairman of the Shengyu Financial Group had a powerful background and was famous. Who would have thought that it was him? Such an illustrious figure was actually such a young man? She couldn't keep her face straight and couldn't help but feel uneasy. Earlier she was still shouting so fiercely, but now she was beaten so badly that she didn't even dare to breathe loudly. But if she had to immediately lower her head and bow her head, she wouldn't be able to back down from the table. Chapter 3203. However, if she were to lower her head and bow immediately, she wouldn't be able to get out of this embarrassing situation. If she immediately behaved humbly, then wouldn't her swaggering earlier be a joke? She couldn't embarrass herself like that. The woman's face was a little dark. This kind of situation was really too awkward, so she just stood there and said nothing. The man was also uneasy. He was afraid that if he said another word, he would offend them even more. Hence, he kept his cool and stood nervously at the side. When Xiaoichen saw this, he snorted coldly. Why else would this society be so snobbish? If it weren't for his daddy's superior status, would they be so timid? This society was ruthless. It didn't make sense to some people who were superior to others. When Lu Jinyu saw this, he said coldly, Why aren't you getting lost? When the man heard this, he felt as if he had been granted amnesty. Just as he was about to flee with his wife and son, he suddenly thought of something and turned back to ask carefully, Oh Lu, then this matter won't affect Wanku and Shengyu's development project, will it? Lu Jinyu sneered and said, Whether this matter affects or not depends on our boss's mood. However, if you don't give me a clear explanation, I think you won't be able to keep your position as the executive director. How could this be? The man quickly begged for mercy and said, So Lu, there's a misunderstanding. You must plead for me. How would I know that I'm lucky enough to live in the same villa area as Xiaomu? Don't make a fool of yourself here, hurry up and scram. Lu Jinyu's attitude became very cold. When the man heard this, he didn't dare to say another word and hurriedly left. After such an unpleasant incident, Yu and Xiaoichen were still sulking. Jinyu. Yes. Continued to follow up on the proposal with Wanku. However, Boss, don't worry. Do you think I don't understand what you mean? I'll handle this matter properly. Lu Jinyu was a perceptive person. With one look from Muyaja, he immediately understood his intentions. Put the documents on the table. Lu Jinyu placed the document on the table. Just as he put it down, his eyes secretly drifted in the direction of little Yueyao. His mouth was watering. Boss, can I hug the little princess? Asterisk caret 0 caret. Asterisk, Muyaja's eyes were cold. No. Lu Jinyu's face fell. Why? I knew you had ulterior motives. Muyaja snorted. Deliver documents. I think your motives are not pure, right? I'm just hugging. Boss, how can you be so stingy? When I have a daughter in the future, I'll let you hold her too. However, a certain man was very principled and said, I have my own daughter. I don't care about other people's. His stance was clear. However, since Lu Jinyu had come and failed to carry the little princess, how could he return empty-handed? He was thick-skinned and called him boss repeatedly. Finally, after much coaxing and pestering, he got his wish to carry the soft and squishy ball. When he carried little Yueyao, Yu Yu and Xiaoichen stood on either side of her. They were prepared to snatch her back the moment she cried. Chapter 3204. Lu Jinyu finally got what he wanted and carried Yueyao in his arms. Although the way he carried the child was a little inexperienced, it was still considered standard. Previously, the reason why Yueyao kept crying and throwing a tantrum, other than being unable to recognize him, was probably because the way he carried the child was not very correct. After returning home, he consulted the mother around him and learned how to carry a child. Now he was a little more confident. He carried her carefully, and the little princess reluctantly gave him some face. She did not cry and throw a tantrum like the last time. Instead, she widened her big eyes curiously and looked at him as if she was sizing him up. However, after carrying her for a while, he seemed to be despised by the little princess. Little Yueyao suddenly looked in Muyaja's direction and stretched out her chubby little hands, asking for a hug. This action of hers made Muyaja feel extremely satisfied. See, the child can recognize people. That's good. He liked it when his daughter only recognized him and no one else. That way, no one else could covet his daughter. Muyaja said, Yueyao doesn't want you to carry her. Give her to me. Lu Jinyu was a little reluctant when he said that. He pulled a long face and felt a little aggrieved. However, Yueyao struggled fiercely and kicked her little legs as if she despised him. Lu Jinyu was also afraid that something would happen. No matter how unwilling he was, he could only let Muyaja carry the little princess away. Of course, after that, the family of 5 said that they were going for a walk in the park. A certain someone shamelessly insisted on tagging along, hoping that when Muyaja got tired of carrying her, he would have an excuse to carry her for a while. However, it did not occur to him that Muyaja was full of energy. Even if he carried the little princess for a few hours, his arms would not feel tired at all. When he carried Yueyao in his arms, his heart felt heavy. He could not bear to put her down, so how could he feel tired? Hence, after shopping for an entire hour, Lu Jinyu could only watch helplessly from the side. Did he want to hug her? That was basically wishful thinking. Actually, Lu Jinyu didn't care much about children in the past. Hence, when he was in his 20s, he didn't think of getting married. He wanted to find a woman to get married and have children. To him, whether it was a boy or a girl, he wasn't particularly obsessed. However, little Yueyao was born. The moment he saw her, his heart bloomed with love for the little princess. He was even more determined to have a daughter in the future. However, Muyaja had also said that instead of coveting his daughter, he might as well get married and have a child himself. The problem was this marriage something that could be done just because one wanted to? In order to get married, one had to find love first, right? Love was too extravagant. It could only be met, and it had nothing to do with preparation. Even though he was mentally prepared, that person just didn't appear. Could it be that he had to find a random woman just to give birth to a daughter? Yu encouraged Yun Shishir and said, Mommy, why don't you introduce Auntie Xiao Shui to Uncle Jinyu? Auntie Xiao Shui is so pretty and she's a good match for Uncle Jinyu. No, Yun Shishir and Lu Jinyu said in unison. This was a tacit understanding. Yun Shishir's reason was, I'm not a matchmaker. Outsiders can't interfere in matters of the heart. However, Lu Jinyu said, I don't like it when others introduce my girlfriend to me. It's fine if both parties are satisfied, but if they're not, it'll hurt our friendship. Chapter 3205. After taking a walk home, Lu Jinyu also said goodbye. After returning home, he called the vice president of Wanku. He meant to say that there was no problem with Wanku and Xingyu Financial Group's development project, but they would have to change the director. Change the director? There was only one executive director in Wanku. If they wanted to replace him, they would have to fire the original director. The vice president immediately asked him if someone had offended him. Lu Jinyu didn't say much and ended the call hastily. When this matter reached the ears of Zhang Wansan, the executive director of Wanku, he immediately felt uneasy. He originally thought that this matter would be left unsettled. He didn't expect that the man would pursue it to the end. However, Wanku's attitude was very clear. The value of this case was immeasurable. If they missed it, they were afraid that their future cooperation with Shengyu would face difficulties. Wanku didn't want to offend Shengyu, nor did they want to lose this reliable source of cooperation, so they wanted to fire Zhang Wansan. How could they let this go? When Zhang Wansan heard this, he begged his grandfather and grandmother to find connections. He didn't sleep the entire night. Wanku also expressed that he could stay in his position, unless Shengyu said that they would no longer make things difficult for Wanku because of this matter. Therefore, Zhang Wansan didn't go to the company the next day, thinking about how to resolve this matter. Both husband and wife realized the seriousness of this matter, so they had a good discussion. In the end, the man suggested that they should personally make a statement. Therefore, the couple carried their gift bags and braced themselves to go to the door, only to find that there was no one at home. Muyaja only had one weekend off a week, when he could put aside his company's affairs and rest for a day. On this day, Yu said that the fourth phase of the Fairy Tale Valley theme park project had been completed, and that she wanted to experience it. Therefore, the family of 5 got ready and went out. Before leaving, Yun Shishir confirmed the belongings she would bring, including milk bottles, milk powder, diapers. After confirming that everything was ready, the family set off in a grandiose manner. The 4 of them had specially changed into the parent-child outfits that Yu had designed previously. They were white casual shirts, and on the back of each shirt, there was a cartoonish portrait of each of them. This was personally designed by Yu, and it was very lifelike. Fairy Tale Valley was very popular, and it was the most famous theme park in the country. During the weekends and holidays, the flow of people was especially high. However, Yu was not worried about this problem. With just a phone call, he successfully received a VIP card from the ticketing center. With the VIP card, he did not need to line up and was given priority to enter the park. He also did not need to line up for any of the events and could enjoy himself to his heart's content. The last time he came to Fairy Tale Valley was for his 7th birthday. However, there was an accident on the way, and he couldn't enjoy himself. This time, the 2 little guys agreed to play a few more games. Just as they entered the park, Yun Shishir saw a staff member at the entrance. He was wearing a thick costume and was holding a cartoon balloon in his hand. There were about 50 balloons in his hand clustered together, and it was very impressive. It also made for a beautiful scene at the entrance. Yun Shishir walked over and asked for the price. The staff member said that it was 100 yuan each, and VIP cards could receive it for free. Chapter 3206. Yun Shishir raised her head and saw that Muyaja was nowhere to be seen. She scanned the crowd and finally noticed him. He was tall and slender. Even though he was wearing a casual shirt, a black jazz hat, and a pair of spectacles on the bridge of his nose, such a simple outfit still made him stand out in the crowd because of his noble temperament. He stood in front of a dreamy shop and quietly waited for his turn. When it was his turn, he bought 4 cotton candies. One was pink, one was blue, one was white, and one was yellow. He held 2 cotton candies in each hand and walked towards her. When he walked over, the passers-by kept looking at him and whispering excitedly, "Oh my God, look! That man wearing sunglasses, he looks like a superstar." I heard that Fairy Tale Valley signed Hua Jin as their spokesperson not long ago. I heard that the official website released news that Hua Jin will be attending an event at Fairy Tale Valley as a guest. Could it be today? Are you kidding? Is Hua Jin that tall? He's definitely not a superstar because I've never heard of such a person. In the set, Hua Jin was going through the script when he suddenly sneezed elegantly and said gloomily, "Who's talking bad about me?" The crowd kept getting congested. It was unknown whether it was because the tourists were hiding or because there were many people approaching Muyaja, but the area where the pram stopped was so congested that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Many little fangirls even secretly raised their phones and aimed the camera in Muyaja's direction to take pictures secretly. Click, click, click. Some tourists forgot to turn off the flash. Yoon Shirshir felt that she was being secretly photographed and looked in the direction of the light. Taking the cotton candies from Muyaja, Yoon Shirshir suddenly said sourly, "Hubby, you're dressed so low-key and there are so many girls surrounding you. You're so charming." Muyaja was a little confused at first and did not know what she was jealous about. It was only when he turned around and saw people crowding around him and secretly taking photos of him that he finally understood the source of her jealousy. He leaned closer to her and deliberately teased her. "Why are you jealous?" Yoon Shirshir snorted. "No way." Yu and Xiaoichen stood at the side and looked at each other meaningfully. They covered their mouths and snickered. "Daddy, mommy is jealous. Who told you to attract so many girls?" "That's right. Look, there are so many girls surrounding you and secretly taking pictures of you. TSK, TSK, TSK. Yoon Shirshir pursed her lips and was about to take a bite of the cotton candies. However, the man beside her suddenly bent down and took a bite of the cotton candies in her hand. The pink cotton candies quickly turned into sweet sugar stains on his lips and looked especially alluring. "You have your own. Why do you want to eat mine? My wife's is delicious." He licked his lips gently and took the opportunity to hold her hand. He pushed the pram with his other hand and slowly walked forward. This action unconsciously made it clear to everyone that he was already taken. In this way, some people should not be jealous. Chapter 3207. How can this be fake? Look at him pushing the stroller and holding that woman's hand. It looks like he's married and has a child. No way. Sigh. All good men are taken. I don't think so. Who said that a man pushing a stroller must be a father? Maybe it's someone else's child. When Yu heard this, he suddenly curled his lips into a sinister smile. He lowered his head and glanced at the stroller. Little Yueyao was looking at the hydrogen balloons tied to the stroller with her eyes wide open. She actually became excited and waved her hands around, reaching out to grab the balloons as if she wanted to play with them. He fiddled with the hydrogen balloons, causing them to sway slightly. Little Yueyao stared at the hydrogen balloons motionlessly, watching them float around. She became even more excited and kicked her little legs, revealing her soft gums. "Yaya!" The tender voice attracted Muyaja's attention. He stopped in his tracks and walked to the front of the stroller. He didn't know when little Yueyao had woken up, but she was smiling so widely that her eyes looked like two crescent moons. His heart softened a little, and he reached out to hug Yueyao. "Come, let Daddy hug you." With this hug, the people around them sighed again and again. He had to call himself Daddy. This young and handsome man must be married and have a child. Yu heard the disappointed discussions around him and sneered in his heart. What are you looking at? His daddy was already taken, so what chance did they have to covet him? The little one was in his arms, but she didn't look at him. Instead, she turned her head and straightened her neck, staring at the hydrogen balloons. She was so excited that she reached out to grab them, but she couldn't. She was so anxious that she kept kicking her legs. Little Yueyao turned her head and patted Muyaja's cheeks eagerly. She seemed to be asking him to let her play with the helium balloon. When Yoon Shirshir saw this, she immediately untied a rope and held the hydrogen balloon in front of her. Little Yueyao's small hands grasped the rope tightly, but with great strength. Her grip strength was definitely extraordinary among babies of the same age. Yueyao felt that it wasn't enough to just hold on to it, so she tugged harder. The hydrogen balloon swayed in midair and moved up and down as she tugged. Suddenly, the little Yueyao's hand loosened, and the hydrogen balloon broke free of its clamp and slowly floated up into the blue sky. Ah! Little Yueyao's eyes widened in surprise as she watched the hydrogen balloon fly higher and higher. It was as if there were countless little stars twinkling in her eyes. It was exceptionally beautiful. Yoon Shirshir followed her gaze and looked at the balloons that were rising higher and higher. There was a small heart in the round transparent balloon. Under the blue sky and white clouds, the scene was dreamy. Yu and Xiaoichen also looked at the balloons that were constantly rising. Little Yueyao's crisp laughter echoed in their ears. Ha ha ha! The people around them also stopped and looked up into the sky. Someone exclaimed, "Aya! Whose balloons are flying? Oh my God! These balloons cost 100 yuan each. Why do I feel like there's a red 100 yuan bill flying up into the sky? How high can these balloons fly?" Xiaoyichen suddenly felt extremely happy. Her heart was filled with happiness, and she was extremely satisfied. Chapter 3208. He was happy because it was in Fairy Tale Valley that he met Yu and his mommy for the first time. However, he was worried because he did not have enough fun in Fairy Tale Valley. Firstly, the last time he came here with his daddy, Song Inya and Song Enshi had tagged along. This was especially so for Song Enshi, who kept sticking to his daddy. She either wanted him to accompany her on the merry-go-round or to hug her. His daddy doted on her, so he kept hugging her. He found the scene of his daddy hugging Song Enshi to be an eyesore no matter how he looked at it. At that time he could only follow behind them alone. He watched his daddy carry Song Enshi while Song Inya stood beside him. The three of them laughed and chatted happily, looking like a real family of three. He, on the other hand, was the only one left out and felt extremely uncomfortable. He still remembered that Song Enshi kept clamoring to ride the merry-go-round at that time. He did not like it. It was not that he was not interested in the merry-go-round, but that he had a stubborn child. No matter how much he liked something that someone he hated liked, he could not bring himself to like it. Therefore, when he saw his daddy carrying Song Enshi on the merry-go-round, his heart felt empty. Later on, Song Enshi deliberately teased him and slandered him for pushing her. In the end, his daddy escorted her to the hospital and left him alone in Fairy Tale Valley. He felt as if he had been abandoned by the world. But it was different now. His daddy was carrying his sister, and the people walking with him were his mommy, his younger brother, and their family of 5. Especially when he saw his daddy carrying Yueyao with a doting expression, he felt extremely blissful. Xiaoyichen took a bite of the cotton candy and smiled happily. He suddenly tugged at Yu's sleeve and said happily, "Yu, are there any fun activities in Fairy Tale Valley? Let's play together." When Yu heard this, he looked a little lonely. He licked his lips and said helplessly, "There are many activities that I can't play. I can only watch you play." "Are there no activities suitable for you?" "No." Yu pointed at her chest and said, "Some games are too exciting. I feel uncomfortable here and can't breathe." Moreover, he had respiratory syndrome. If he played a game that was too exciting, it would trigger. At that time it would spoil everyone's mood, and the loss would outweigh the gain. It was rare for the family of 5 to gather together and come out to play. His younger sister was still around. He didn't want to spoil the fun just because of his health. Xiaoyichen knew that because of his health, he couldn't enjoy many events to his heart's content. However, there should be events that suited him, right? Fairy Tale Valley couldn't be filled with exciting activities, could it? What about the merry-go-round? Muichen pointed in the direction of the merry-go-round. "This ride isn't exciting. You can ride it." "The carousel is fine." The two little munchkins walked up to Yun Shirshir and egged her on. "Mommy, can you ride the merry-go-round with us?" Yun Shirshir had no choice but to ask Muyaja to look after little Yueyao. Thus, she held the two little guys' hands and walked towards the merry-go-round. With a VIP card in hand, there was no need to line up for any of the events. Muyaja sat on a long bench at the side and waited for them to come out after they finished playing. Not long after he sat down, little Yueyao looked a little anxious. He whined like a kitten, as if he wanted something. Chapter 3209. Muyaja was quite experienced. He knew that she was hungry and wanted to drink milk. There was milk in the milk bottle that Yun Shirshir had prepared beforehand. He only needed to take it out, shake it evenly, open the lid and bring the pacifier to her mouth. She took a bite and sucked on the pacifier. Hugging the milk bottle, she sucked on it with relish. She was probably very hungry. Ever since she woke up, she had only drunk a few mouthfuls of milk and had not eaten much. She had been sleeping soundly in Yun Shirshir's arms. When they entered the garden, the little guy's attention was attracted by the hydrogen balloon. Now that there was no attraction, her hunger came. She hugged the milk bottle and drank quickly, but surprisingly, she did not choke. "Slow down." Muyaja saw that her face was flushed red from drinking too quickly. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. He could not help but say, "No one is fighting with you." He was afraid that she would suck on the pacifier until it broke. This little guy really, she had sucked on 2 or 3 of the pacifiers at home. Such a battle record was something that no other baby girl of the same age could achieve. Only his little princess had the ability to do so. Many tourists passed by and saw this scene. They saw a handsome man sitting on a bench with a tender little princess in his arms. He hugged the milk bottle and drank with relish. They could not help but click their tongues in wonder. These days, bringing a baby who was not even a year old out to play, but most of the time it was the mother who took care of the child. It was very rare to see a father taking care of a child. And such a young and gentle father. Hey, why don't I have such a young and handsome father? If I had such a father, I would wake up laughing in my dreams. Ha ha ha. If I had such a father, I probably wouldn't be able to find a boyfriend in this lifetime. Don't tell me you have a daddy complex. No way. If my father is so handsome, why would he fancy those wild boys outside? These words fell into Muyaja's ears without missing a beat. The corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. These words made his ears feel especially good. Wow, did you hear that? Your daddy is so handsome. In the future, if you find a man who isn't as handsome as daddy, don't bring him back. Little Yueyao held the milk bottle and tilted his head as if he didn't understand his words. He blinked his eyes and continued to suck on his beloved milk bottle. By the time Yun Shirshir and the 2 little munchkins came out from the merry-go-round, little Yueyao had already eaten her fill and was sleeping soundly in Muyaja's arms. Yun Shirshir walked over to his side. Seeing that the little Yueyao was sleeping soundly, she was shocked when she saw the empty milk bottle next to his hand. You fed her milk? Yes. Xiaoichen was also so surprised that he picked up the milk bottle and couldn't close his mouth. Wow. He drank it all? Little sister's appetite is so big. Little sister has always been like a wolf drinking milk. If this goes on for a long time, will she gain weight? Yun Shirshir was also worried. Will she eat until she's full? Why didn't you ask her to eat less? I wanted to. Muyaja said helplessly. When I tried to snatch her milk bottle, she glared at me angrily and refused to let go of the bottle. If I tried to snatch it from her, she would definitely choke. Chapter 32:10. Burp. It sounded like a small bubble bursting. Yu and Xiaoichen were amused. Oh my, how could little sister be so cute? They couldn't bear to part with her. Yu wanted to hug her, but the sun was getting brighter. Yun Shirshir was worried that Yueyao would get sunburned, so she urged, "Put Yueyao in the stroller to sleep." Muyaja was reluctant to let her go, but the sun was indeed getting brighter. He reluctantly put the little guy in the stroller and pushed it towards the next attraction. Mommy, do you still remember? As they passed by Happiness Street, Yu looked at the game stall and said excitedly, "You won a toy for me here before." Yun Shirshir saw this and thought of something. She giggled and said, "I remember. You said you wanted to play before, but you couldn't make many shots." Yu's face instantly turned red. He said indignantly, "That's because I wasn't in shape. Now that I'm playing shooting games, I'll definitely improve." With that, he pulled Little Chen over to the hoop machine. After flashing his VIP card, he took the ball from the hoop and started throwing it indignantly. Yun Shirshir and Muyaja walked over and stood outside the crowd to watch. Yu tried his best to shoot the ball. His face was red from holding back, but it wasn't that he didn't improve. However, in the past he could only make 1 shot. Now he could make 2. Such a small improvement wasn't worth mentioning. After only half a minute, his stamina couldn't keep up. His accuracy dropped again. In the end, he only managed to score more than 500 points and won a commemorative prize. Yu left the basketball machine dejectedly. Xiaoichen walked up to him and said, "Yu, Big Brother will win a prize for you." He showed his VIP card as well. Soon the time started. He grabbed the basketball, his eyes burning with a fierce fire. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. He threw 10 consecutive shots and hit the target every time. Xiaoichen had great stamina. Furthermore, he was much better at sports than Yu. Therefore, he was naturally gifted at sports like basketball and soccer. He rarely played basketball and he didn't shoot much either, but his accuracy was surprisingly high. By the time the game ended, He had obtained more than 1,000 points and could get a second prize. Second prize, this prize was already very generous. It was a rare toy from Laji, and Xiaoqian successfully won it. It was a cute and lifelike little tiger with snow-white fur and emerald-like eyes. It was extremely realistic. Xiaoqian thought it was just a simple plush toy. When he received the toy, he muttered, "So this is the second prize. It looks very ordinary." "Of course not." Yu scoffed and took the toy from his hand. Then he gently pinched its left paw. With a beep, it entered recording mode. It turned out that this plush toy wasn't an ordinary tiger plush toy. It also had a recording function. Yu said to the tiger's little mouth, "Little Yueyao is the most beautiful princess in the world." Chapter 32:11. Wow! You can play like that. If you press the left paw, the previous recording will be replaced. Little Chen could not bear to let go of the cub as he smiled from ear to ear. "This is so fun. Did you design this as well?" "Sort of." "What do you mean sort of?" "Not all the toys were designed by me, but the designs were all approved by me." Yu said proudly. "Do you know why Lu Jiwei beat those old toy companies and became the world's #1 toy company?" Xiaoqian was puzzled. "Why?" "That's because most of the toys designed by adults are perfunctory. Only those who are truly childlike can design toys that all the children in the world like." Yu continued. "Only the children can understand what kind of toys they want." When they passed by the shooting range, Yu suddenly recalled the first time they were at Fairy Tale Valley. Xiaoqian had hugged a giant panda and stood in line at the entrance of the haunted house. At that time, he was surprised that someone had won the first prize in a shooting game. Later, when he found out that Xiaoqian had won, he was even more surprised. Why was this guy so good at all kinds of games? "Xiaoqian, your shooting skills are so good. Go and win a special prize." Xiaoqian said, "My shooting skills are not even half of Daddy's." Then Xiaoqian said to Muyaja coquettishly, "Daddy, go and play that shooting game and win a special prize for you." Muyaja said, "No." "Why? Such a childish game." Yu snorted and said mockingly, "Daddy is afraid that he won't be able to play well and will lose face. That's why he didn't dare to accept the challenge." Yun Shirshir laughed in her heart. This method of provocation probably wouldn't work on a certain man. However, the outcome was unexpected. A certain man snorted coldly, stood up and said, "Are you looking down on your daddy's standards? Then Daddy can only use his strength to slap his face." Yun Shirshir was confused. "I'll go. Who was the more childish one? Can't you hear such obvious provocation?" Muyaja walked to the front of the adult design table, showed his VIP card and said to the staff, "Give me a gun." His appearance attracted the attention of countless people. This man was always so dazzling when he appeared in the crowd. So much so that when he appeared, the surrounding crowd suddenly quietened down. Their gazes fell on this tall and handsome man, sizing him up. Even the staff member couldn't help but become infatuated. After staring blankly for a long time, she blushed and handed the heavy gun to him. Muyaja raised his gun, and the countdown began. He aimed at the bullseye and pulled the trigger. The bullet immediately cut through the air and shot out. Although the speed was slow, his aim was accurate. He aimed at the most inflated part of the balloon. He knew very well which part of the balloon was the weakest. Therefore, every bullet that was shot out would be accompanied by the sound of an explosion. The balloon burst. Bang, bang, bang. A few rounds of bullets were fired. None of them missed. Gasps could be heard coming from the surrounding crowd. Chapter 32:12. While everyone was still in shock, Muyaja focused on raising the gun. He loaded the gun skillfully and pulled the trigger again. Bang! 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 Along with the sound of balloons bursting, the scoreboard fell to the ground one after another. The crowd was in a heated discussion. "This man's marksmanship is amazing. It doesn't look like it's his first time using a gun. Could he be a shooter? Judging from his aura, he seems to be from a military academy." When the last bullet was used, there were still a few seconds left. Muyaja put down the gun. The staff member was still in a daze and did not react for a long time. It was only when the time was up that she snapped back to her senses. The man reminded her expressionlessly, "It's time to calculate the points." "Oh." The staff member collected the scoreboard and calculated the total points. There were more than 800 points. Xiaoqian was also shocked. He walked over to take a look and saw that there were a few 50 points. Daddy's luck was so good. When he first started playing this game, he only had about 300 points. Daddy's points actually broke the record that he had kept until now. More than 800 points. This was really unprecedented. In the future, Daddy could only break the record on the shooting range for fun. Mu Yaja was not surprised by this result. In fact, it was a good result that he had expected. The staff member smiled and said, "Sir, you have a total of more than 800 points. You can choose any of the prizes on the shooting range, including the special prizes in the area." At this moment, little Yueyao woke up. Yun Shishir carried Yueyao in her arms. The little girl rubbed her sleepy eyes and blinked gently. When Xiaoqian saw that his little sister had woken up, he said to Yu, "Why don't you pick a toy that little sister likes?" When everyone saw this, they could not help but gasp in amazement. This little girl is so cute. Look at her eyes. They're so beautiful. It's no wonder that this little girl is so beautiful. She doesn't even know what kind of genes her parents have. One is handsome and the other is beautiful and gentle. This girl is also a natural beauty. When she grows up, she will definitely be a super beauty. That's great. Now I want to have a daughter too. However, Yu and Xiaoqian started discussing nervously. My little sister likes dolls. Why don't we get the first prize for the SD doll? But the grand prize is a 1-meter-long giraffe. Yu and Xiaoqian ran to the prize area. They each picked up an SD doll and a giraffe and walked over to Yueyao for her to choose. "Sister, what kind of toys do you like?" Yun Shishir hugged Yueyao and asked gently. "Yueyao, your two brothers are asking you what toys do you like." Everyone's gaze fell on little Yueyao. They were curious to see how this adorable little girl would react. Little Yueyao first looked at the SD doll that Yu was holding up high. Her big eyes lit up and she immediately reached out to grab it. She seemed to like it very much. Yeah. She could not speak yet, so she could only babble incoherently. However, from her expression it seemed that she really liked this doll. Yun Shishir was curious when she saw this. Yueyao seems to like the SD doll more. When Yu saw that she liked it, he quickly pushed the SD doll into her arms. Chapter 32:13. When Xiaoqian saw this, he reluctantly hugged the giraffe and squeezed in front of Yu again. He said to Yueyao, little sister, don't you like this doll? It's a giraffe. When you grow up, you can hug it to sleep." When the people around them saw this, their hearts were warmed by this loving scene. These two little brothers must be twins, right? They were so nice to their little sister. It was obvious that these two little guys doted on their little sister a lot. Some of the moms were envious and amused at the same time. Many families would fight over a toy when they had a second child. They were afraid that one of them would be favored and the other would be neglected and ostracized. Sometimes bickering was unavoidable. Hence, a harmonious relationship between children was extremely rare and precious. When Yueyao saw the giraffe in Xiaoqian's arms, she instinctively reached out to grab it. To her, there were so many interesting, fun, and novel things in this world. She would find anything that she had never seen before interesting. However, she was still so young and didn't know how to choose. She only knew that she wanted whatever was given to her. When Yu saw this, she immediately shouted, "Muichen, don't go back on your word. Little sister obviously likes the SD doll more." "Says who? You're the one who's going back on your word. If you didn't want to put the SD doll in front of little sister so badly that she can't see the toy in my arms, she wouldn't want your doll. What do you know? All girls like dolls. Especially the SD doll. It's exquisite and realistic. Little sister will love it so much that she won't be able to put it down. The giraffe is still the cutest. Little sister will definitely like the present I choose." The two little guys, one holding the SD doll and the other hugging the giraffe, were arguing about whose present their little sister would like more. The surrounding people burst into good-natured laughter. Mu Yaja's lips twitched. He walked over and said, "Why are you arguing again? Daddy, Yu is being shameless." "You're the one who's being shameless. I don't care. Anyway, little sister wants an SD doll first." Yun Shishir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She asked Yueyao, "Yueyao, which brother picked your favorite toy?" Yao looked at the SD doll in Yu Yu's hands and then looked at the giraffe in Xiaoqin's arms. For a moment he was in a dilemma. She then looked at the two little lads who were looking at her with eager eyes. She was so nervous that she held her breath. It was as if this wasn't a toy selection but a sacred election. In his heart he was shouting, "Sister, choose me, choose me." Yao suddenly stretched out both of his hands. One of his hands reached for the doll in Yu Yu's arms, while the other hand reached for the giraffe in Xiaoqin's arms. Yun Shirshir explained, "It's broken. Your little sister is greedy. She wants both." Muyaja held his forehead and said, "Stop arguing. Since Yao likes both, then she wants both." He went back to the shooting range and said to the staff, "I'll play again. Again." Chapter 32:14. Muyaja looked to the side and saw two staff members holding balloons, perspiring profusely. They were blowing them with their cheeks puffed up. They looked at him pleadingly. The staff member immediately tried to smooth things over. "Sir, your shooting skills are obvious to all. Why don't we give you both toys? After all, you've earned more than 800 points." When they left Fairy Tale Valley, Muyaja pushed a pram with a gigantic giraffe plushie on top of it. Her adorable expression attracted the attention of countless people. Little Yao lay in the pram, hugging the SD plushie in her arms. Occasionally, she would grab her hair and occasionally play with her limbs. She was overjoyed. Xiaoqian and Yu were like two guardian deities guarding the pram as they walked towards the parking lot. Yun Shirshir walked at the back. Looking at this scene, she felt as though her heart was filled with something. Sometimes, happiness was just a momentary perception. In a certain frame, her heart was filled with happiness. At this moment, she suddenly felt that everything in her life, everything she had now, there was nothing else she could ask for. In the past, when she was still a young girl, her biggest wish was to meet a man she truly loved and walk into the sacred hall of marriage with him. However, at this moment, she suddenly felt that a grand wedding wasn't that important anymore. Dullness was true. These words were not false. Although life after marriage was peaceful, every day when she hugged him to sleep, she could see his sleeping face when she woke up. She had two adorable sons and an adorable daughter. In this life, God treated her well. Everything that she had was not easy to come by, so she knew to cherish it even more. Muyaja pushed the pram and suddenly realized that there was an empty space beside him. He stopped in his tracks and turned around. He saw Yun Shirshir walking slowly behind him. He smiled and extended his hand to her. "Shirshir, hold my hand." Yun Shirshir was stunned. Looking at his outstretched hand, she smiled sweetly and extended her hand to him. He held it fast at once. She caught up to him and heard him say, "There are so many people. Don't get lost." She took his arm and smiled at him. Yes. When the family of 5 returned home, they were met with Zhang Wansan's family, who was waiting at the door. They went to Fairy Tale Valley to play, and the Zhang family really waited at their door for an entire day. Seeing that Muyaja had returned, Zhang Wansan immediately came up to him and personally apologized to him. He didn't want him to lose his job because of such a small matter. On the other hand, the woman at the side secretly shed tears. She seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter and knew that she had offended a big shot. It was too late for regrets. Holding her son's hand, the woman and the child bowed and apologized repeatedly. "Chairman Mu, we know we were wrong. We have eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. Please forgive us." The little guy was really frightened. He kept bowing and apologizing. His childish voice was trembling. The arrogance and domineering attitude he had when he bullied Yu was gone. Instead, he was crying helplessly and rubbing his tears. He was extremely sad. It was probably because Zhang Wansan had taught him a lesson yesterday that he knew he was in the wrong. Muyaja was hard-hearted and naturally ignored him. Xiaoqian and Yu also wanted to enter the house without looking back. Chapter 32:15. The little boy was stunned. He raised his head and looked at the gentle woman in front of him in astonishment. When the child's mother saw this, she had mixed feelings. Thank you, Mrs. Mu." "Mommy, why are you paying attention to them?" Yu said unhappily. "Don't bother about them." Yun Shirshir said to them, "You can go back." But Zhang Wansan still looked at Muyaja hesitantly, as if he wanted to say something. Yun Shirshir seemed to know what was on his mind. She said calmly, "There's a saying that goes, a close neighbor is better than a distant relative. This matter is over. I just hope that you will discipline your son well in the future. Children can't be spoiled. They'll be spoiled." Yes, I'll definitely discipline my son well. In the future, I won't let him be so unreasonable and bully other children. Zhang Wansan left with his wife and son. Yu looked at their backs as they left. He said unhappily, "Mommy, why are you so gentle to them?" Yun Shirshir suddenly squatted down in front of him and said calmly, Yu, do you know? Leaving some leeway for others is also leaving some leeway for yourself." Yu seemed to understand. Ever since the incident with Yana, Guxing's death, and when she regained her sight and could see the world clearly, Yun Shirshir's state of mind had changed greatly. She started to believe in karma. She believed that a good cause would lead to a good outcome. She believed that one should be forgiving whenever possible. Sometimes there's no need to force people into a dead end. It's not like there's a deep hatred. Sometimes, if you force someone into a dead end, who knows what kind of revenge that person will take out of hatred in their despair. Yu, do you know? Mommy believes in karma now. I only think about how to conduct myself in the world and how to be peaceful. I also hope that what Mommy does can accumulate some karma for all of you. Mommy, don't be afraid. Daddy and Yu will protect you. However, Yun Shirshir said, compared to being protected by Yu, Mommy really wants to protect you and not let anyone hurt you. When a person is in despair, they will develop great hatred because of a single mistake. In the midst of hatred, people would often lose their rationality. In other words, if Zhang Wansan really lost his job because of this matter and fell to the bottom of the valley, who knew how ruthless they would be and how they would deal with them? She didn't want anyone to ruin this peaceful happiness. However, according to Muyaja's character, even if he didn't make Zhang Wansan lose his job, it was inevitable that he would be demoted a few levels. However, Zhang Wansan was already extremely grateful for this kind of treatment. From then on, the Zhang family became much more well-behaved. Sometimes when they bumped into each other on the road, they would nod politely and greet each other. Of course, this was all in the future. The date of the wedding has been set. When Gong Jie received the notice and learned that the wedding would be held in a month's time, he was filled with mixed feelings. He made a trip to Hurricane's headquarters but did not return to the Gong family immediately. Instead, he went to take a look at Yun Yeqing, wanting to tell him the good news as soon as possible. Yun Yeqing had been transferred to a ward. His body had yet to fully recover and was still waiting for surgery. However, he had already undergone a few skin grafts, and his face had basically recovered. It was just that it was difficult for such a recovery to be exactly the same as before the disfigurement. Chapter 32:16. Gene regeneration was a huge project. Alice told Gong Jie that it would take more than 30 surgeries to reconstruct his basic functions if he were to fully recover. Of course, the recovery she was referring to was only in a certain sense. For example, the recovery of vocal cords and the functions of other organs. When Gong Jie entered the ward, Yun Yeqing was lying on the bed with an oxygen tube inserted. His eyes were open and he seemed to be awake. The electrocardiogram showed that everything was normal. He walked to the bed, bent down and called out to Yun Yeqing. "Uncle." Yun Yeqing turned his head slightly and glanced at him. With much difficulty he said in a hoarse voice, "Xiao Jie, you're back?" Gong Jie sat down by the bed and took out his phone. He found the wedding post and a few wedding photos that Yun Shirshir had taken for him. He passed them to him and flipped through them for him to see. At the same time he said softly to him, "Shirshir is getting married soon. Before that, work hard to recuperate. I'll bring you to the wedding venue." Upon hearing this, Yun Yeqing's lifeless eyes opened wide at once. His gaze brightened a little. Shirshir is finally getting married. When little Yuya was born, he was still in a coma after the surgery because of his condition. He could not rush over personally. When he woke up again, he found out from Gong Jie that Yun Shirshir had given birth to another daughter. He felt rather gratified that they had made a good son. However, at the same time, he could not help but feel regretful. He could not be by his side when his beloved daughter was giving birth. He even had to see his granddaughter through photos. In the photos there was a family of 5. Muyaja sat by the bed and hugged Yun Shirshir in his arms. Yun Shirshir was holding little Yue Yao and facing the camera. Xiaoi Chen and Yu Yu were smiling at the camera and making victory gestures. It was warm and beautiful. When he saw it, he felt incomparably gratified. However, when he heard Gong Jie say that he would be bringing him to the wedding venue, he was suddenly put in a spot. If Shirshir is getting married, I won't go. When Gong Jie heard this, he was extremely surprised. Why? Xiao Jie. Look at me, there are so many VIPs at the wedding. I'm afraid my appearance will scare them off. Uncle, how can you think like that? Gong Jie comforted him. If you don't go, Shirshir will be sad again. She would definitely want you to be a witness for such an important occasion. Hearing this, Yun Yecheng felt touched and sad at the same time. He blinked and tears welled up in his eyes. He still felt that he had let her down. Because of Yun Na. He had always been brooding over it. Gong Jie comforted him again. He said, You're Shirshir's father. You're her most important relative. When Yun Yecheng heard this, tears welled up in his eyes again. Only then did he nod and agree to go. However, when Gong Jie left the ward, he recalled what he had just said and was momentarily stunned. You're Shirshir's father. You're her most important relative. Then what about her father? Gong Jie returned to the Gong residence absent-mindedly. Just as he walked upstairs, the butler saw him and immediately stopped him. Young master, old master is waiting for you in the study. Father is looking for me? Chapter 32:17. Gong Jie hesitated for a moment before he turned and went to the study. In the study, Gong Xiaoying was sitting at the table with a photo in his hand. His gaze fell on the photo and it was dark and inexplicable. When he heard a knock on the door, he looked up and casually placed the photo into a stack of documents. Come in. Gong Jie pushed the door open and walked in. He looked at him and said respectfully, Father, you were looking for me? When Gong Xiaoying saw that it was him, he slowly stood up and walked in front of him, sizing him up. Kid, you seem to have disappeared from the face of the earth some time ago. I don't know where you went to fool around again. When Gong Jie heard this, he felt extremely guilty, but he pretended to be calm and explained, I went to Africa some time ago to follow a batch of orders. Africa? Gong Xiaoying smirked coldly and said in a low voice, I've checked your whereabouts. You've been in Z country some time ago. Gong Jie was speechless. He secretly suspected that his father had sent someone to follow him, or had deliberately investigated his whereabouts. However, Gong Xiaoying said, Why? Are you hiding something from me? Gong Jie said, No. No. Gong Xiaoying probed. You've been going to Z country. Don't tell me that you've kept a little pet there and can't bear to come back. Gong Jie knew that the little pet Gong Xiaoying was referring to was a woman. He said, Father, you didn't send someone to follow me, did you? No, I didn't. I just saw that you were always distracted, so I was just asking. However, Gong Xiaoying did not expose him. The father and son looked at each other for a long time. In their eyes they were sizing each other up and probing each other. Gong Xiaoying had summoned him to get some information from him. However, this kid had sealed his mouth tightly and did not say a word. He knew that he would not be able to get any information from him. Hence he said, Go back. I have nothing else to ask you. Gong Jie wondered if his father had sent someone to investigate his whereabouts, or if his father had followed his trail and found out about Yun Shirshir. However, it wasn't appropriate for him to directly ask about these doubts. If it wasn't true, it would be like him confessing without being pressed. Or perhaps his father was just testing him. He didn't know about Yun Shirshir at all. Thinking of this, he had mixed feelings, but he didn't say anything and left the room. Gong Xiaoying saw the door close and returned to the desk with a complicated expression. He took out the photo from the pile of documents. This was a photo taken by Yun Shirshir for a fashion magazine. He sent someone to investigate Yun Shirshir's whereabouts. Among the information brought back by his subordinates, there were a series of photos and posters of her. He only kept this one because it had Mu Qingqing's shadow in it. Based on this photo alone, he was certain that the woman in the photo was his daughter. He had always thought that his daughter was no longer in this world. Mu Qingqing had given birth to a pair of twins for him. However, he had always thought that this daughter had unfortunately died. He didn't expect that she was still alive. Yun Shirshir. That was his daughter's name. Chapter 32:18. On the eve of the wedding, there was a lot of preparation work. Wuxia started preparing a month in advance to avoid being flustered due to the lack of time. The wedding invitations had been sent out one after another. This time, the invitations were personally designed by Yun Shirshir. After her confinement, she did not make a comeback immediately. When she was at home, she would read some reference books and think about the setting and invitations for the wedding. In order to be able to participate as much as she could, she learned some graphic design. The design of the invitation was very special. With a red background, a gold inlaid border and a hollowed-out rose, it was a combination of Chinese and Western, adding to the festive atmosphere. After the invitations were sent out, they had to start preparing the details of the wedding. For example, the bridesmaids and groomsmen. Yu suggested forming a group of sisters, but Yun Shirshir did not have many close friends. Those who had been married before could not be the bridesmaids. Hence, the bridesmaids were decided to be Xiao Shui, Mu Shi, and Junemo. When Junemo heard that Yun Shirshir wanted to invite her to be the bridesmaid of the wedding, she was surprised and happy. She joked that she played the second male lead, Su Qi, in the movie The Green Apple. Now, she was finally going to personally send her lover into the wedding hall. However, she was a little worried that she would not be able to pull off a dress. Junemo had always been dressed in a more neutral outfit. In addition, Yun Shirshir's wedding was a Chinese wedding. Hence, she was quite worried. However, the wedding planner said that if short-haired people would look out of place in traditional Chinese clothing, they could provide wigs. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she immediately dragged the 3 bridesmaids to try on the makeup. After trying it on, she realized that Junemo looked very good in women's clothes. After all, her facial features were there. A good-looking person would look good in anything. Junemo felt a little awkward at first, but Yun Shirshir repeatedly emphasized that this was the only wedding and they had to give face. Junemo could only bite the bullet and agree. There was no need to worry about the groomsmen. Lu Jinyu and Zhang Shan were the best candidates. Wuxia also invited Qin Zhou to be the groomsmen. Such a joyous occasion, Qin Zhou was naturally happy. The bridesmaids and groomsmen were finally decided. When they came back in the evening, Yun Shirshir showed Wuxia the photos of the bridesmaids trying on their makeup. Wuxia especially noticed Junemo's appearance. He recognized Junemo as the second male lead in the movie at a glance, and felt that it was a little unbelievable. Who is she? Wasn't he playing the second male lead? Yun Shirshir said reproachfully, "Have you forgotten? I've introduced her to you before. Her name is Junemo. She's a real girl." She was a musician and liked to dress in a neutral manner. Her fans had always called her Adonis or Adonis. She had suffered a little because of my wedding. It was said that this was the first time she had worn a dress since she was young. You've made me feel flattered. Wuxia held back his laughter and nodded. It's very beautiful. He asked again, "Have the invitations been sent out?" Actually, the VIP list for the wedding had been prepared long ago. Many of the invitations had been written long ago. However, there was an invitation that would never reach that person's hands. Chapter 32:19. This invitation card probably wouldn't be sent to him. However, she did not know why she had written his name on the invitation. When she came back to her senses, she realized that this invitation would not be sent to the other side of the world. She did not know if there would really be a heaven in this world like the legends said. She had seen a movie called The Postman of Heaven. The plot was about the male lead who was once an elite in the IT industry. He had a successful career and a flamboyant personality. However, due to an accident, he became a vegetable. God gave him 2 more weeks of life as a condition for him to be the postman of heaven. He would deliver letters between heaven and the human world, bringing hope to those who had lost their loved ones. She did not know if this invitation could be sent to heaven. If Gu Xingze was really in heaven, would he wish her happiness too? Thinking of this name, the rims of her eyes turned slightly sour again. In the past, she did not dare to hope too much for happiness, because once she became happy, she felt uneasy at the thought that this happiness was built on Gu Xingze sacrificing his life to protect her. It was too selfish of her. However, Qin Zhou said that Gu Xingze risked his life to protect her only because he hoped that she could be the continuation of his life. She could replace him and enjoy the joys and sorrows of life. She gradually got rid of the trauma. Xingze, are you okay? Yun Shishir smiled and mumbled as she slowly closed the invitation. Mu Yaja pushed open the door of the study and walked in. He saw her sitting alone at the table, pressing an invitation to her chest. She looked a little lonely. He walked over and gently put his arm around her shoulders. Looking at the invitation in her hand, he knew whose name was written on this invitation. He asked, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking if this invitation can be sent to him." Mu Yaja could not help but laugh and burst her fantasy. Heaven does not exist in this world. When people die, they will not come back to life, and they will not become angels. The disappointment on Yun Shishir's face became more obvious. She also knew that her extravagant hope did not exist. It was just her wishful thinking. He slowly squatted down in front of her, held her hand and said solemnly, "That's why in my limited life I'll cherish you." He reached out his hand and pinched her cheek gently. "My dear wife, you're about to get married. Don't think about those unpleasant memories anymore. People will inevitably have regrets in their lives, but these regrets cannot be brushed aside for the rest of their lives." "Yes." Yun Shishir put the invitation card back into the drawer and hugged him gently. The preparations for the wedding proceeded in an orderly manner. There was still a week before the wedding, so Gong Jie brought Yun Yecheng back to the country in advance. When Yun Yecheng got off the plane, he saw Yun Shishir carrying the pink Yueyao at the arrival gate. Mu Yaja, Yu Yu and Xiaoichen were all there. The corners of Yun Yecheng's lips twitched. He could not hold back his tears and they welled up. The father and daughter reunited again and were filled with emotions. Yun Yecheng felt extremely guilty and regretful toward her. During the darkest period of her life, he was not by her side to protect her. She was pregnant for 10 months, gave birth, and went through her confinement period after giving birth. He regretted that he was not by her side. Chapter 32:20. There was an indescribable sense of guilt in his heart. Yun Shishir, on the other hand, was very surprised by Yun Yecheng's recovery. Ever since he was sent to the Gong family, they had been in contact through video calls. From the video, she could tell that Yun Yecheng was recovering very quickly, but she did not expect him to recover 50% of his looks. At least after skin grafting, some of his functional organs were no longer a problem. Although his looks could not be said to have recovered completely, after some adjustments, it had already exceeded her expectations. What was even more surprising was that he could already speak fluently. After a few vocal cord surgeries, he could already express himself clearly in words. Yun Shishir was pleasantly surprised. She hugged Gong Jie and was so excited that she could not speak. Gong Jie smiled. "Sister, I promised you that I'll do my best. Since I've said that, I naturally have to fulfill my promise." Yun Shishir said sincerely to him, "Thank you, Xiao Jie. Don't you think it's too polite to say thank you?" Gong Jie had returned to the country to prepare for her wedding. Originally, Mu Yaja had invited the media to cover the entire wedding, but Yun Shishir requested not to be too ostentatious. However, because it involved the guests attending the wedding, most of them were of noble status, especially someone like Xiao Jie, who could not be exposed in front of the cameras. Furthermore, there were many national politicians and leaders, as well as nobles from various countries. If the media were to expose it, it would be too much of a fuss. She wanted to keep a low profile. Yu Yu said from the side, "You're already destined to not be able to keep a low profile after marrying a perfect man like Daddy." At the side, Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were amused. "Yu Yu's words are amazing." Mu Yaja was elated when he heard that. As a father, he could not help but feel smug when his son praised him so much. Yun Shishir said in annoyance, "Yu Yu, Mommy is being serious. Mommy will be nervous if there are more than 10 media outlets following this wedding. Mommy, you've seen a lot of the world after all. You've also been to Fashion Week. When you were filming, there were so many cameras pointed at you, but you didn't seem nervous at all. This is different." "How is it different?" Yun Shishir reiterated again. "Marriage and acting are different. If there were any mistakes during filming, they could still redo it. But when it came to marriage, they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to redo it. I only have one chance in my life, so I'm very nervous. Gongjie said. Speaking of which, I'm curious why I'm not the best man. Yu said. Because Daddy is afraid that Uncle will cause trouble if he doesn't like it. Yu added. The best man's job is the most difficult. Uncle, I'm sure you won't be able to take it. Shaoichen chimed in. That's right. The best man is the groom's slave. Uncle, are you willing to do that? Little Ichen replied. It's a small matter to ruin the wedding. What if Uncle regrets it halfway and can't bear to let Mommy marry Daddy? If that happens, Daddy won't be able to chase after them. The two little fellows echoed each other. Yun Shirshir snorted and snickered. Gongjie's face turned pale. If I couldn't bear to part with him, would I have specially rushed back to the country? For Yuyao's sake, I wouldn't ruin the wedding. He was not that pretentious. He had already silently accepted the fact that Mu Yaja was his brother-in-law. Chapter 32:21. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun, who were sitting at the side, felt that they had been implicated. They jumped up and protested. What do you mean by the best man can't be too handsome? Exactly. Then what are we? Sister-in-law, we don't like what you're saying. Aren't we handsome? Gongjie was satisfied. However, Mu Yaja was displeased. Madam, are you saying that I'm not as handsome as brother-in-law? Gongjie chimed in. Is there a need to ask? Sister is just worried that I'll steal your limelight if I'm the best man. Shut up. The truth is hurtful. Brother-in-law, this means that in sister's eyes, I'm more handsome than you. Shut up. Haha, I won't. Mu Yaja glared at him. Gongjie glared back at him. Their eyes met, and there was a burst of electromagnetic sparks. Yun Shirshir said. She seemed to have unintentionally started a war. Yu saw that her father and uncle were at loggerheads. She quickly tried to smooth things over and change the topic. Uncle, how much have you prepared for Mommy's wedding? Gongjie said. 50 million. Yun Shirshir widened her eyes in shock. 50 million? Yeah. Gongjie wrapped his arm around her arm and rested his chin on her shoulder. He smiled and said, Sister, are you touched? Mu Yaja reached out and pushed his face away. He sneered. 50 million? How petty. Petty? Gongjie was furious. 50 million US dollars is petty? Do you want me to give you all my assets? Mu Yaja reached out shamelessly. Give it to me. Gongjie sneered. Brother-in-law, you're so shameless. Mu Yaja returned an elegant smile. No matter how shameless I am, I'm not as shameless as you. You keep saying that sister is the most important, but you only prepared a dowry of 50 million. How petty. Gongjie gritted his teeth and said, Fine, I'll give you 100 million then. 100 million. Yun Shirshir sucked in another breath of cold air. She hurriedly used her fingers to calculate how much 100 million US dollars was worth. Yu watched from the side. She finally knew who Shaoichen had inherited his poor arithmetic skills from. 100 million US dollars is equivalent to about 700 million yuan. 100 million US dollars is equivalent to 700 million yuan. It was the sound of a golden abacus. Yun Shirshir felt a headache coming on as she was being hit by the money. That much? How much was little Jie's net worth? How could he casually fork out 100 million? Yun Shirshir doubted the credibility of this statement. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a triumphant smile. That's more like it. Keep your word, I'll be waiting for your check. Gongjie felt that he had been tricked. His face was ashen, but he couldn't say anything to refute. Yun Shirshir comforted him. It's okay, Shaojia. When you get married, get your brother-in-law to give you 200 million. Gongjie's eyes lit up. Really? Yun Shirshir nodded solemnly. Yu held her face and screamed, Daddy, the backyard is on fire. Mommy is going to sell you. Shaoichen collapsed on the sofa laughing. He hugged Mu Yaja's stiff back and laughed until he couldn't catch his breath. Daddy, hurry up and earn money. Otherwise, when Uncle gets married, you won't be able to give him anything. Mu Yaja said. I refuse. 200 million? No. Yu also collapsed from laughing. Although Daddy could afford 200 million, if he took out 200 million at once, his little treasury would be empty. Among everyone present, Gong Jia had the highest net worth. Chapter 32:22. Yu Yu was well aware of Gong Jia's wealth. His wealth was comparable to that of a country's. The annual revenue from orders in North America alone was more than a few billion US. After deducting the costs, the net profit was more than $3 billion US. This was only the revenue from orders in North America. Apart from that, the total volume of arms sales in Africa was even more impressive. Most importantly, Gong Jia owned 2 military factories. The arms produced by these factories were sold to various countries and were very profitable. Yu Yu had once described Gong Jia as his uncle. He was so rich that his hand would be greasy when he touched it. Hence, $100 million US was nothing to him. However, this amount was still relatively objective for his daddy. Yu Yu's heart ached for his daddy for a few seconds. Hua Jin had rushed over from the filming set. When he opened the door and saw Gong Jia, his back stiffened instantly. Oh my God, the crown prince was here again. It was the Devil King. Hua Jin deliberately walked around Gong Jia and sat next to Xiaoyi Chen. Gong Jia noticed that Hua Jin seemed to be avoiding him and frowned slightly. Why are you avoiding me? Do you think I will eat you? You will, however. Hua Jin only dared to keep these words to himself. He did not dare to say it out loud. Gong Jia was his nemesis. In his heart, Gong Jia had always been on the level of a demon king. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to hug my little niece. As he said this, Gong Jia stood up and walked towards the baby's room. He had been so focused on discussing the wedding that he had not seen the little Yueyao that he had been thinking about day and night. When he walked into the baby's room, little Yueyao was sleeping soundly in the cradle. Gong Jia did not want to disturb her, so he sat quietly by the side and rested his chin on one hand. He leaned against the side of the bed and looked at her quietly. After watching for a long time, the little Yueyao yawned and woke up in a daze. Interestingly enough, when he saw her yawn, he unconsciously followed suit and yawned as well. It was said that if one party yawned, the other party would also be affected. Little Yueyao opened his eyes and looked around. When he saw Gong Jia, he raised his eyebrows slightly and raised his little hand to point at him. In Gong Jia's eyes, it looked like he was greeting him. This squishy little ball obviously recognized Gong Jia. She kicked her little legs excitedly, opened her little hands and scratched at him. He was obviously asking for a hug. His niece was asking for a hug. As her uncle, he was naturally happy to oblige. Gong Jia reached out and held little Yueyao in his arms under the little girl's armpit. But the next scene made him not know whether to laugh or cry. Perhaps it was because she had slept for too long, but the little girl was a little hungry. She pulled Gong Jia's clothes with familiarity, opened her little mouth, and accurately sucked on Gong Jia's chest through his clothes. Gong Jia's back stiffened. He lowered his head and looked at the little Yueyao's greedy face. Her little mouth left a circle of water on his clothes. He was speechless. Where did he get the milk from? This scene was coincidentally seen by Yu Yu, who pushed the door open and walked in. At first, she was stunned for a moment. Then she laughed until she was convulsing with laughter. Ha 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 ha. Yu Yu's laughter attracted a group of people over. Chapter 32:23. Gong Jia's face was gloomy. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and looked helpless. When he saw Muyaja enter, he became even more embarrassed and asked Yun Shirshir for help. Sister. Ha ha. Yun Shirshir was also laughing so hard that she doubled over. Gong Jia said angrily, Sister, you're still laughing at me. Hurry up and feed her. Yun Shirshir laughed and said, Just you wait. She turned around to get the milk bottle. Then she walked over and handed it to Gong Jia. Gong Jia looked at the milk bottle and was stunned for a moment. After Yun Shirshir explained, he realized that Yueyao had used too much force when she was drinking milk, and it always hurt her. Hence, she used a breast pump to suck all the milk into the milk bottle, and then used the milk bottle to feed Yueyao. She must have been drinking the milk bottle for a long time. Gong Jia shook the milk bottle gently, and then brought the pacifier to Yueyao's mouth. The little girl opened her small pink mouth and sucked on the pacifier. Then she drank the milk with relish. Yun Shirshir couldn't help sneaking glances at the water stains on his chest from the corner of her eye. She couldn't help but laugh secretly from time to time. After Yueyao's 100th day celebration, Gong Jia went abroad. Even though he hadn't held Yue Yao for a long time, he was still very familiar with the way he held her. When Yu Yu saw this, he secretly whispered in Xiaoyi Chen's ear, "Uncle's way of holding Yue Yao is so professional. He's much more qualified than Daddy." Mu Yaja heard him. He grabbed him by the ear and said darkly, "What are you saying about me again?" "I'm just saying that Uncle's way of holding Yue Yao is so professional. He'll definitely be a qualified stay-at-home dad in the future." "Am I not?" "Of course Daddy is. Otherwise, how could he have raised Yue Yao so well?" Mu Yaja was finally satisfied. Gong Jia watched Yue Yao suckle and asked, "Can she talk now?" "Not yet. Little sister has just learned how to sit." That day when they went out to play, little Yue Yao suddenly sat up in order to snatch the toy from Yu Yu's hands. This gave Yu Yu a fright. After returning home, Yu Yu told Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir that his little sister could sit up on her own. However, no matter how hard Yun Shishir tried to teach little Yue Yao to sit up, the little girl remained indifferent. Until one day she accidentally walked into the room and saw little Yue Yao sitting up alone, playing with a toy. She got a shock. That was when she realized that perhaps little Yue Yao had already learned how to sit up. However, this little girl was very lazy. Unless she was attracted by something, she would rather lie down than sit up. Gong Jia did not believe her. He moved the milk bottle away and looked at Yue Yao patiently. "Yue Yao, call me uncle." "Yeah. Uncle. Uncle." "Yeah." Gong Jia had an "I've lost to you" expression on his face. Yun Shishir said, "She can't talk yet. If you teach her like this, she'll only think that you're playing with her. When she can talk, I'll definitely make her call me uncle first." "No way." Mu Yaja disagreed. "Give up. The first person she would call would definitely be Daddy or Mommy. Uncle. Dream on." Gong Jia sneered. "How easy is it to pronounce uncle? Daddy is so difficult. Little Yue Yao will definitely not be able to learn it." However, a certain man was very confident. "My daughter is so smart. No matter how difficult it is, she'll be able to learn it." Chapter 32-24. Brother-in-law, let's bet that the first person Yue Yao calls is uncle. When Yu Yu heard this, he protested unhappily. "Why can't she call me brother?" Gong Jia smacked the back of his head and said in disdain, "Go away. This is none of your business." Yu Yu held the back of his head and glared at him fiercely. Suddenly he thought of something and smiled slyly. He turned around and whispered something in Xiaoyi Chen's ear. The latter gave Yu Yu a knowing look and smiled mysteriously at him. The two little lads smiled slyly. At night, Yu Yu and Xiaoyi Chen tiptoed through the bedroom door and slipped into the master bedroom. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Little Yi Chen tiptoed into the nursery in the master bedroom and walked to the side of the cradle. He poked his head over and saw that little Yue Yao was awake. Her big eyes were wide open, and when she saw him, she was so excited that her eyes squinted and she smiled. Her little legs kicked in excitement. Xiaoyi Chen immediately put his finger up and gestured for her to keep quiet. However, little Yue Yao did not understand what he was gesturing at. Instead, she was curious. She widened her eyes and tilted her head in confusion. He bent down and carefully picked up little Yue Yao. Then he carried his little sister and slipped out of the room and into his own bedroom. Yu Yu took out the milk bottle and let Xiaoyi Chen carry little Yue Yao. He first fed his beloved little sister milk. When the little girl was full, Xiaoyi Chen carried little Yue Yao in his arms. Yu Yu looked at her and smiled gently. "Yue Yao, brother will teach you how to speak, okay?" Little Yue Yao smacked her lips. Her bright eyes sparkled under the moonlight. Yu Yu grabbed her little hand and said word by word, "Brother, brother." He deliberately spoke slowly and enunciated each word clearly. He was teaching her seriously. When Yue Yao heard this, she was tickled by his slow speech and especially amused expression. She kicked her little legs excitedly and giggled. "Ha ha ha." Yu Yu was confused and repeated, "Yue Yao call brother. Brother? Ha ha ha." Little Yue Yao kicked her little legs excitedly again. Yu Yu held his forehead. He felt inexplicably helpless. Xiaoyi Chen quickly comforted him and said, Yu Yu, don't be anxious. My sister is only 6 months old. Teaching her to speak at this time is already ahead of schedule. Moreover, she doesn't know anything and needs to be taught patiently. Hearing this, he innocently replied, "Sis doesn't seem to understand what I'm saying. You're so big, but you can't understand what others are saying. Take it slow." Xiaoqian grinned and said, "You have to teach her how to call you brother first. Uncle and Daddy will be furious." "Humph, that's right." When Yu thought of how Gong Jie would look when he heard Yue Yao calling him brother, he perked up again. "Brother. Ha ha ha. Brother. Brother. Ha ha ha." In the end, Yu's throat was almost smoking from teaching. He didn't know how this little one could laugh so easily. She couldn't stop laughing. You love to laugh. Chapter 32-25. Yu pinched her tender cheeks only to see Yue Yao yawn. He hurriedly said, "Hurry up and send her back to sleep." Xiaoqian nodded and secretly carried Yue Yao back to her room. The next day at night, Yu calculated the time. He already knew his little sister's schedule like the back of his hand. He knew what time she would wake up in the middle of the night and when she would want to drink milk. Hence, he secretly carried Yue Yao back to his room and patiently taught her how to speak over and over again. When Yue Yao was sleepy, Xiaoqian would carry her back to the nursery. However, after 4 to 5 days, little Yue Yao did not seem to have made any progress. When he taught her to call him big brother, she would sometimes get impatient and kick him with her little feet. Yu could not help but feel aggrieved. After all, his mommy said that he could already say mommy when he was 5 months old. The pronunciation of mommy and mommy were several times more difficult than gij. In the end, after so many days of teaching, there was still no progress. Yu could not help but feel a little disappointed. Even so, he did not give up. On the eve of the wedding, Muyaja withdrew a stack of brand new banknotes from the bank. These banknotes were to be used to prepare red packets for the children. Each red packet contained $888, $800 bills, 8 $10 bills, and 8 $1 bills. The amount was not large and was purely for luck. However, these red packets had to be packed by hand. Yu and Xiaoqian volunteered to pack the red packets. When Yun Shishir saw that they had volunteered to share the burden, she went to the garden with peace of mind and cut some Chinese roses to be used as the bride's bouquet. On the day of the wedding, they would have an outdoor wedding and an indoor one. The outdoor wedding would be a Western-style lawn wedding, while the indoor wedding would be a traditional Chinese wedding. A Western-style wedding would have a relaxed and romantic atmosphere, while a Chinese wedding would be grand and solemn. This was also the final result of the discussion between Yun Shishir and Muyaja. There were both Western and Chinese elements, and they did not conflict with each other. A lawn wedding was for the young guests. It was relaxing and romantic, but as the main venue, the wedding was more solemn. After Yu and Xiaoqian sealed the red packets, another red packet appeared. Yu said that he wanted to give the red packet to his little sister. As soon as they reached the baby's room, Yu leaned over the crib and stuffed the red packet into little Yue Yao's hand. "Here, little sister. This is a red packet for you. Call me big brother." He was merely joking and teasing her. After all, he didn't really expect his sister to be able to call out his name. However, what happened next gave Yu a big surprise. Little Yue Yao reached out her little hand and pinched the corner of the red packet tightly. Her other hand fiddled with the red packet curiously, not knowing what was inside. She held the red packet with one hand, opened and closed her little mouth and said 2 words, "Gee." Yu was really shocked. He nervously held his breath and listened carefully. Little Yue Yao gave him face. She waved the red packet in her hand and said with saliva bubbling from her pink little mouth, "Big brother." Wow! Yu was so excited that he almost jumped 3 feet high. Chapter 32-26. Yu hurriedly picked up little Yue Yao and ran into the living room. Yun Shishir was meticulously arranging the bouquet. Yu carried little Yue Yao to Yun Shishir. She was so excited that she didn't know what to do. "Mommy! Mommy! Little sister can speak. And the first person she can call is big brother." When Xiaoqian heard this, she leaned over in surprise. "Really? Really?" When Yun Shishir heard this, she didn't think much of it. She asked curiously, "Yue Yao can't speak yet. Yu, did you hear wrongly?" How could she not know that this little guy wanted to hear Yue Yao call him big brother, even in his dreams? Yu hurriedly explained, "Mommy, little sister really said big brother. I really heard it loud and clear." How could I have heard wrongly? No one taught her to call him Big Brother. Why would she call him Big Brother for no reason? Yun Shishir only knew that Gong Jia and Muyaja had been secretly teaching little Yueyao to call him Uncle and Daddy. These two clowns seemed to be racing against time, fighting to be the first person Yueyao would call out Uncle or Daddy, especially Muyaja. In order to make Yueyao open her mouth, he had used all sorts of methods. He had even used Yueyao's favorite toy to seduce her, but he still couldn't get her to open her mouth. There was nothing he could do about it. How old was Yueyao? She was more than 5 months old and still couldn't speak coherently. She could only vaguely use a few syllables to indicate her emotions. She would have to wait for 6 or 7 months before she could speak. However, they couldn't rule out the possibility of her speaking earlier. Yu said, "Mommy, it's true. I've been teaching little sister to call him Big Brother for the past few days. Didn't Mommy say that I also learned to speak earlier? Maybe little sister is smarter than me?" As he spoke, as if afraid that Yun Shishir wouldn't believe him, he gently squeezed Yuyao's little hand and said patiently, "Little sister, Mommy doesn't believe you. Hurry up and tell Mommy, what did you say just now?" Little Yueyao acted as if he did not hear what Yu said. He was still focused on the red packet in his hand. Her little hand was holding the red packet, almost tearing it apart, but she was playing with it enthusiastically. Yu tried her best to attract her attention. She shook her little hand and said gently, "Little sister, didn't you call me very clearly just now? Why aren't you barking now? Come on, let Mommy hear it. She doesn't believe me." "Big Brother, little sister, quickly call him Big Brother." When little Yueyao heard this, she thought that he wanted to play with the red packet in her hand, so she immediately raised the red packet in her hand and generously handed it to him. Yu was instantly amused and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he still emphasized, "Mommy, Yueyao really did call me Big Brother." "Really?" Yun Shishir's eyes turned into crescents. She smiled and said, "Okay, Mommy got it. Maybe it's just a coincidence that little sister called him that once. There's still plenty of time in the future, so there will be more opportunities." Xiaoqian couldn't help but feel a little regretful that he didn't hear Yueyao call him Big Brother. However, according to what Mommy said, there was still plenty of time in the future. Moreover, he was very open-minded. Even if he wasn't the first to learn to call him Big Brother, it didn't affect his love for his little sister. Little Yueyao yawned lightly, as if she was a little sleepy. Chapter 32:27. Okay. Yu obediently carried Yueyao into the room. When she came out, she sat next to Yun Shishir and asked curiously, "Mommy, the wedding is the day after tomorrow. Are you nervous?" Yun Shishir was stunned when she heard this. She nodded slightly and said with a red face, "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. Of course I'm nervous." Even though she had already rehearsed the wedding ceremony, she felt increasingly nervous as the wedding date approached. She didn't know why she was nervous, but she just felt nervous. Yu covered her mouth and giggled. "Is Daddy nervous too?" "Daddy seems to be busy with the wedding recently," Xiaoqian mumbled. "Sometimes, he can't even make it back for dinner. He's busy decorating the venue. I told him that there would be someone to decorate the venue, but he wouldn't listen. He said that it's his own wedding, so he has to do everything himself. I even went to the bridal chamber with Daddy yesterday. It's so beautifully decorated." The bridal chamber was at Yunshan-Shuri. Therefore, when the bride was picked up, they had to bring her to Yunshan-Shuri before going to Yunshan-Shuri Resort for the wedding. The night before the wedding, Muyaja went to the bridal chamber according to wedding tradition. At night, Yun Shishir was so nervous that she couldn't sleep. She had to get up early the next morning to wash up and dress up, but she still couldn't sleep until midnight. She was worried that something would go wrong at the wedding the next day. She didn't know if Muyaja was asleep, so she sent a text message. "Would be, are you asleep?" Within a few seconds Muyaja replied, "Not yet. You're still awake?" Yun Shishir pursed her lips and dialed his number. Muyaja picked up the phone and asked her why she wasn't asleep. Yun Shishir said coquettishly, "I'm so nervous that I can't sleep." "Why would I be nervous? Aren't you nervous? Close your eyes and don't let your imagination run wild. You'll fall asleep soon." "But," Yun Shishir said hesitantly, I'm nervous about whether the wedding will go smoothly tomorrow. On the other end, the man laughed when he heard that. If I can't even handle a wedding, how can I be worthy of being your man? These words were very pleasing to her ears. Her man was so reliable and gave her a great sense of security. Her heart was filled with sweetness. Yun Shishir then said, "Then I'll go to bed early. You should rest early too." Yes. After hanging up the phone, Yun Shishir turned off the wall lamp and fell asleep peacefully. The next day, the alarm clock went off at 5 o'clock. Yun Shishir woke up with a start. She was still a little groggy at first, but Yu knocked on the door and said, "Mommy, the makeup artist is here." She immediately woke up, and her sleepiness disappeared. She immediately went to the bathroom to wash up, and then opened the door. Outside the door, two makeup artists in well-ironed uniforms were dragging suitcases in their hands. This suitcase was filled with the equipment needed for the makeup. When they saw Yun Shishir, the two makeup artists were surprised. "Oh, the bride's skin is so good. I put on a facial mask last night." The makeup artists looked at each other and smiled. Then they said to Yun Shishir, "Shall we start the makeup?" Yun Shishir sat at the dressing table. Starting from her face, the two makeup artists started working separately. One put on her makeup, the other arranged her jewelry and ironed her clothes. Chapter 32:28. One was a shoha dress for the wedding, the other was a wedding dress for an outdoor wedding, and the other was a traditional Chinese wedding dress for an indoor Chinese wedding. Mu Yaja had specially hired a top stylist and makeup team. Hence, even if it was a mixed Chinese and Western wedding, there was no need to worry about the makeup clashing. It was already 6 o'clock when the makeup was done. Yun Shishir had just changed into the shoha dress when Gong Jie arrived. He walked into the room and saw that Yun Shishir had already changed. She stood in front of the full-length mirror and let the makeup artist put on the forehead ornament for her. When she turned around, Gong Jie was really stunned. He muttered sourly as he walked toward her. "I don't know where brother-in-law got his luck from to be able to marry my sister." He stood in front of her and looked at her gently. Suddenly, his lips curled into a smile as he gently held Yun Shishir's hand. "Sis, you're so beautiful." Yun Shishir looked at him and asked tentatively, "How beautiful?" "The world's most beautiful." You only know how to make me happy." "How am I making you happy? You're so beautiful that I can't bear to marry you off." Gong Jie's words were sincere, especially when he saw Yun Shishir's beautiful side. He cursed fiercely in his heart. He did not know what methods Mu Yaja had used to kidnap his sister. "He won't be able to welcome you easily today." Gong Jie laughed sinisterly. "I learned about the process of a Chinese wedding last night. It's said that the groom's family has to guard the door when he welcomes the bride. He won't be able to enter the door so easily." Yun Shishir asked nervously, "What are you going to do?" Gong Jie only sneered and did not say anything. At 7 o'clock, Xiao Shui Muxi and Jun Mo arrived. They had changed into their bridesmaid outfits and had their makeup done in advance. Hua Jin also hurried over. As a member of the bride's family, he was in charge of guarding the door. At that time, they would just have to wait for the groom to come and fetch the bride. At 8 o'clock in the morning, Mu Yaja arrived with his motorcade. All of them were Bentleys, and the first one was his limited edition Rolls-Royce. When he reached the door, Gong Jie closed the door and gave him the cold shoulder. According to tradition, when the groom fetched the bride's family would definitely guard the door. However, if it were an ordinary family, it would be much easier for Mu Yaja to deal with. All he had to do was to stuff red packets under the door. Mu Yaja had specially given out a few hundred red packets last night. But the problem was, would these red packets be enough for Gong Jie? A certain man had already stuffed dozens of red packets through the crack of the door. Hua Jin had already filled a bag with red packets, but the Gong Jie guarding the door still had no intention of letting him go. "Brother-in-law, this red packet is not enough to open the door." The groomsmen behind Mu Yaja immediately became restless. Lu Jinyu went to Mu Yaja's door and whispered, "Brother-in-law, this brother-in-law guarding the door doesn't seem easy to deal with." Jiang Shun was also anxious. "How many red packets have we stuffed? Shouldn't he let us go now?" Mu Yaja had already expected the Gong Jie to block the door, but today was a special day and he could not afford to be careless. Hence, he asked calmly, Xiaojia, what do I have to do for you to let me in? Do 100 push-ups first. 100 push-ups. Gongjie said again. Do it in one go. You're not allowed to stop. Chapter 32:29. Oh my God! Lu Jinyu exclaimed. His arms are going to be crippled if he does 100 push-ups in a row. How can he carry the bride? Hua Jin's voice came from inside. Not only the groom, but the groomsman has to do it too. Jiang Shun was flustered when he heard that. He lowered his voice and said, Boss, you told me that being the groomsman isn't a good job. I really believed you. Cut the crap. Muyaja handed him the bouquet. Hold it for me first. Jiang Shun took the bouquet from him, only to see Muyaja lying on the floor and doing push-ups one after another without a word. Lu Jinyu broke out in a cold sweat as he watched from the side. His legs turned to jelly at the thought of having to do 100 push-ups later. Doing 100 push-ups was definitely not an easy task. Even though Muyaja had amazing stamina, his handsome face was flushed red and beads of perspiration were dripping down his face when he did the 80th push-up. Gongjie counted carefully through the peephole. When Muyaja finished 100 push-ups, he said, The groomsmen can start too. Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu had the urge to run away when they heard that. Muyaja glanced at them and said, What are you waiting for? Since boss had given the order, they had to pull up their pants and do as he said. Lu Jinyu even loosened his belt and looked like he wanted to say something. He shot a resentful look at Muyaja before lying on the ground with Jiang Shun and starting to do push-ups. Qin Zhou felt miserable and said indignantly, Chairman Mu, why didn't you say so earlier? Why are you torturing your groomsmen? Cut the crap. Do 100 push-ups quickly. Qin Zhou was so angry that his stomach hurt. He patted his stomach and secretly encouraged himself before lying on the ground with a long face. The three pitiful groomsmen were doing push-ups one after another on the ground. At first they looked decent and could be considered standard. However, they gradually lost their stamina, especially Jiang Shun, who had been neglecting his exercise for the past few days. When he reached the 80th push-up, he felt that it was no longer a push-up. It was a salted fish. Lu Jinyu was the first to finish. After he got up, he slumped onto the ground and began to doubt his life. Muyaja thoughtfully handed him a handkerchief. Lu Jinyu took it weakly and leaned against the wall, no longer caring about his poise. Jiang Shun and Qin Zhou finished at the same time. Both of them looked like they wanted to cry. Qin Zhou said, I've never done so many push-ups in my life. Muyaja faced the door and asked, Can we go in now? Gongjie's voice drifted out. How can it be so simple? Huh. Jiang Shun felt a lingering fear. Don't tell me you're up to something again? Gongjie said. Do another 100 sit-ups. Lu Jinyu almost fell to the ground. Qin Zhou finally understood what was going on. He moved closer to Muyaja and said in a low voice, Chairman Mu, I can see what he's trying to do to you. Oh, this brother-in-law of yours wants you to bow down and beg for mercy. Perhaps he'll let you in then. Beg for mercy? When Muyaja heard this, he realized that Qin Zhou had the same idea as him. Indeed, he and Gongjie had always been at loggerheads. Now that he had such an opportunity, it was obvious that he wouldn't let him in so easily. But asking him to beg for mercy? He would never do as he wished. Chapter 32:30. Under Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun's dumbfounded gazes, Muyaja sat on the floor and ordered, Someone come and hold me down. Qin Zhou immediately walked over and held him down. Muyaja held the back of his head with both hands and started to sit up. Lu Jinyu broke out in a cold sweat as he watched. Inside the door, Gongjie urged, You have to be the best man too. Jiang Shun cried and begged, Brother-in-law, spare me. Gongjie said coldly, Who's your brother-in-law? Jiang Shun smacked his forehead. I can't call him that. He threw himself against the door and cried, No matter who you are, you're the gatekeeper. You can't play like this. After 100 push-ups, my legs are weak. If I have to do another 100 sit-ups, I'd better jump down from upstairs. Just jump. It's only the second floor anyway. Lu Jinyu leaned against the door in disgust. Brother, think about it from another perspective. On the day you get married, if your wife's biological brother stands at the door and asks you to do 100 push-ups, you won't be able to take it. Gong Jie said disdainfully. To me, 100 push-ups is nothing. You guys are too weak. Weak? Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were not convinced when they heard this. How dare he call us weak? No. Prove it to them. 100 sit-ups is a piece of cake. With that, Lu Jinyu sat on the floor and let Jiang Shun hold his legs down as he sat up. After everyone was done, Mu Yaja stood at the door, but Gong Jie still had no intention of letting him in. Xiao Shui ran out of the boudoir and walked to Gong Jie's side. Seeing that the poor groom had not been let in, she did not know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Jie, are you still not letting him in? Don't let the bride wait too long. Gong Jie said. Help me tell sister that the bride should be more reserved. Xiao Shui. In the end, it was Mu Shi who ran out to plead for mercy. Only then did the Gong Jie reluctantly open the door and let Mu Yaja in. As soon as Mu Yaja walked in, his aura surged. Hua Jin was frightened by his aura and immediately raised his hands in surrender. Brother-in-law, this is definitely not my idea. Gong Jie held his head high and puffed out his chest. He even said in disdain, I'll let you off today. Mu Yaja. When Lu Jinyu saw that Mu Yaja's face was covered in sweat, he hurriedly went forward to wipe it off for him. You must be tired, brother-in-law. Gong Jie also smiled, but the way he looked at him was very evil. Mu Yaja stared at him for a long time. His face tense for a while, then suddenly revealed a peerless smile. Just you wait, you will also have this day. Gong Jie also smiled provocatively. We'll wait and see. Mu Yaja walked to the door and knocked. His voice suddenly became gentle. Honey, I'm here. In the room, Mu Shi heard the approaching footsteps and was even more nervous than Yun Shishir. It was only when Mu Yaja's gentle voice suddenly sounded close to the door that she subconsciously reached out to open the door. Xiao Shui quickly stopped her. What are you doing? Mu Shi reacted and immediately retracted her hand. Xiao Shui glared at her and said, You can't open the door now. How can it be so easy to see the bride? Shui. Outside the door, Mu Yaja gently called her name. Be good and open the door. For a moment, Xiao Shui was mesmerized by his magnetic voice and subconsciously reached out to open the door. Chapter 32-31. Mu Yaja reached out and gently touched the bridge of his nose. He seemed to find the situation a little tricky. Qin Zhou, who was beside him, pushed him away. Jiang Shun and Lu Jinyu immediately pounced on the door and slammed it hard. Open the door. Open the door. Bride, open the door. Yu and Xiaoichen had just hidden their red high heels and walked to the door. When they heard Mu Yaja's voice, they snickered. Red packets. Red packets. Mu Yaja heard them and scolded inwardly. These two little rascals. What happened to the cooperation between the inside and the outside? He turned around and ordered Qin Zhou. Stuff them with red packets. Qin Zhou quickly squatted down and stuffed the red packets through the crack of the door. Xiaoichen said greedily, Not enough, not enough. You want to send us away with these few red packets? Qin Zhou continued to stuff the red packets in his hand into the door, but he still could not pass. Jiang Shun shouted pitifully from outside. Sister-in-law, take pity on boss, please. Boss was tortured badly by his brother-in-law. He did more than 100 push-ups and sit-ups. He's so tired that he's about to collapse. Yun Shishir, who was sitting on the bed, covered her mouth and snickered when she heard the commotion. She had long expected that Xiao Jie would not let him in so easily. How could she not know? That was why she asked Xiao Shui and Mu Shi to plead for mercy. Xiao Jie listened to her and let Mu Yaja off. However, there was still a hurdle at the door of the boudoir. Junimo asked through the door. Groom, do you know the bride's measurements? Yun Shishir's face turned red when she heard the sound of jeering outside the door. At a wedding, the bridesmaids were guarding the door. If the groom was escorting the bride, they would definitely come up with a few harmless questions to make things difficult for him. This question was not harsh and was just to create a lively atmosphere. Mu Yaja smiled and said, I know, but it's not convenient for me to reveal it. Is it not convenient for you to reveal it? Or you don't know? Of course I know. TSK. Xiao Shui commented. Sure. Your husband is so protective of you. There are so many groomsmen outside. Chairman Mu definitely won't say anything, Mu said. Jun Mo asked another question. Groom, the bride is asking you if you have anything to say to her? She quickly defended herself. Jun Mo, I didn't say that. Shoo! Jun Mo gestured for her. Sure, Mu Yajas. I love you, sure, I love you. This was Mu's of his heart. Qin Zhou was to Qin. However, Qin Zhou was not satisfied and said, Xiao Mu, that's all you've got. Mu Yaja smiled. I'm not done yet. Held. In the past, I only dared to say I like you, because the words I love you were too unfamiliar and too heavy. But from today onwards I will say I love you to you every day. I've never been good at expressing myself, and I've made you suffer a lot. Along the way we've been through ups and downs. Because of my personality, I'm not good with words and I don't know how to sweet talk. But, do you know? Every time I see you my heart says I love you to you, whether you hear it or not. Jun Mo and Xiao Shui looked at each other. They were touched by his confession. Chapter 32. Mu Yaja continued. I, Mu Yaja, swear. I'll protect you for the rest of my life so that you won't have to wander around and have no one to rely on. No matter how difficult the obstacles are, I'll overcome them for you. Mu Shi wavered when she heard this. She said to Jun Mo, why don't we let the groom in? Don't make things too difficult for him. Okay. Jun Mo then said, however, we can't let him in so easily. Groom, why don't you sing another song to the bride? Sing. Qin Zhou sized up Mu Yaja and was a little worried. Mr. Mu, can you sing a cappella? Mu Yaja deliberated for a moment. Suddenly, he tugged at his tie gently and sang softly. I want to sing to you while I'm young and picturesque while I'm young and have sex, my dearest person. The journey is long. Let's be together, I'll sing to you, give me your pure and innocent smile, we should be happy and blissful sunny times. I'll sing to you, touch you with my burning feelings. Okay, time is worth reminiscing and lingering, shy and blushing face, who can replace you? While I'm young and have sex, my dearest person, the journey is long. Let's be together. Yun Shishir sat on the bed and listened. His voice was still clear through the door. He sang very well. In the past, she had always wanted him to sing to her, but he seemed to be very stingy and reserved. He was always reluctant to sing. Now she was going to use this opportunity to feast her ears. The door slowly opened a gap. Jun Mo blocked the door and cleared her throat. Groom, do you want to come in? Seeing that the door was open, would Lu Jinyu and the rest give it a chance to close it? The group of people worked together to break the door open. However, even though they broke the door open, they still had to consider the 3 bridesmaids in front of the door, lest they get hurt by the door. Yu sighed. Daddy, congratulations on passing. Mu Yaja was in no mood to pay attention to him. At this moment, all his eyes fell on the bride sitting on the bed. It was almost 9 o'clock in the morning, and the sun shone through the window at an angle. Yun Shishir was wearing a red shoha dress as she sat upright on the bed. The gold border of her dress seemed to be plated with holy light. Her exquisite makeup, picturesque eyebrows and bright red lips, however, did not appear to be rich. Instead, they appeared especially charming and seductive. Mu Yaja felt his body heating up. However, he knew that it wasn't because of the Gongjia forcing him to drink 2 glasses of wine outside the door. It was because the woman in front of him was so beautiful that it was too tempting. Each of her outfits was custom-made by a famous designer. Her long hair was tied into a bun, and there weren't many decorations on it. A golden hairpin was enough to set off her exquisite makeup. Mu Yaja was looking forward to seeing her in a wedding dress during the lawn wedding. She would definitely be beautiful, dazzlingly beautiful. He slowly walked in front of her, knelt down on one knee, and presented the bouquet in his hand to her. Madam, I'm here. Yun Shishir was shy and nervous as she looked at the bouquet in his hand. Her hands were intertwined because of uneasiness. Mu Yaja gently guided her. Madam, come with me.